Boom. So, you guys gave me some grief last time for being 3 minutes late. So this time I timed it down to the second. So exactly on time today. How is everyone? Today was a day. Today had some interesting closing arguments. I'll say, and for better or for worse. And we're going to talk a little bit about those because it was a fun day. So we also, and I'm just going to spoil it in case you haven't already seen, we do not have a verdict yet. So there's a verdict waiting. We'll have a verdict watch, I guess. I'm not going to be running like I'm not going to run like a verdict watch, stream or anything, but it'll show up when it shows up. Now, I know a lot of people are going, what do we take from the fact that they didn't give us a verdict today? Well, I'm going to say not a whole lot. And the reason why is that the jury has been at this for forever. The jury has been at this for a long, long time. And this is the first chance they get to actually talk. And so they're going to want to talk about this. They're going to want to talk about what's happening in the trial. They're going to want to talk about things. And they're also not going to want to be seen on this huge trial. They've got to be aware that this is a big deal because it's a multiple week murder trial. They're not just going to walk in the back and be like, so we all think, either not guilty or whichever, and then come out again in 15 minutes. They're going to take some time. They're going to talk about it. They're going to discuss it. And even if they had a verdict sort of in mind right now, I think they'd wait a little bit of time just to be seen to be doing the right thing, right? So I think right now what they're going to be doing is they're going to be chatting about it. They're going to be saying, "Hey, what do you think about this bit of evidence? What do you think?" I mean, would you not want to talk with those other people about the solo cups? Would you not want to talk about Proctor's evidence? Would you not want to talk about all of those things? Of course you would. So it does not surprise me that they are, taking some time. We might get a verdict tomorrow, but we might not. I see that we've got Against the Tide with a theory here. My guess is that we won't get a verdict read until Friday at noon Pacific time, which is when Emily is speaking at VidCon. They'll probably wait until she's on a plane. And yeah, somebody said, have I ever been in a jury room during deliberation? No, I haven't. No, not yet. So, and actually probably never will be because you're not allowed to be on a jury as a lawyer in my area. So, Lawyer is just saying how much he likes you. I am really a fan of Lawyer I really like his stuff. I watch it whenever I can, but I don't really have the time to watch it as much as I would like because I just don't have the time. So, but I like watching his stuff. He's often got a different take on things, but he's got a different take on things that makes me think about it. And that's the thing I really, really love when I get somebody who I may not agree with on everything, and we agree on most things, but every once in a while it's like I don't agree on this bit or whatever. But I just go like, that's making me think about it. I'm never watching his stuff going like, this is, I'm always like, ooh. So yeah, check him out. We've been both covering this trial, so we've got different takes. So I recommend watching more than one take if you got the time, because I've got a different take. Other people do as well. So yeah. And I see I could be a juror as a retiree, live in hope. I suspect that if I was a retired defense lawyer, that we can't bounce people off of juries here anymore. All right. So, how do I want to start this evening off? I've got my little micro fridge here. Now, this micro fridge actually does a pretty decent job. It gets a little, it takes a while to cool things off, but it gets the job done. Okay. So, what else did we need to say today? I'm not going to go through all of the jury instructions. The jury instructions are long and kind of boring. So we're not going to go through all of them. I will just note, somebody says this is sponsored. No, I don't actually have any sponsors at the moment. So I will just say it doesn't look like they got the consciousness of guilt instruction. So that was interesting. And yes, Vez, we do need to settle the dates. Let's figure that out and get them pinned down because that'll be thrilling. Plan is for me to go and do a talk, which I'm super excited about. There's other people who are wondering about date night. So I guess I better sort of mention the date night thing. Normally Tuesday is date night with Mrs. Runkle, and that would have taken priority. Mrs. Runkle is not feeling well today, so she is going to be sleeping. She's going to be napping. And so I was like, can I stream this? Like, are we doing date night? And she's like, go stream. I'm not feeling great. So I bought her soup and I bought her ginger ale, and I hope she's doing a little better. But yeah. The other one that was a surprise is the judge did give the Bowden instruction. So it sounded like she wasn't inclined to, but she did give the Bowden instruction, which was so. All right, let us rock and roll. We're gonna pull this up. We're gonna have when I say we're gonna pull this up, I need to actually share that screen. It doesn't work until I do this. Okay, so we've got Judge Bev Canone there. Is it Canone or Canon or Canone? I'm not sure exactly. I've only seen it written down. So off we go.
Happen to see here or
I think they actually announce her at the beginning, and then I skip by or skip it every time.
Read anything about this case since we left here yesterday?
Canada Dry, come on. We're not doing Schweppes. I like my wife, so yep.
So now we're at the point of the trial where the lawyers get to do their closing arguments for you. I've given them each an hour to do so, and they both tell me that they want me to give a 5-minute warning. I just don't want you to think I'm scolding them when I...
Spoiler alert. She's gonna, I think we end up going a little bit overtime on this one. I'm also going to try to fix the...
Give a 5-minute warning, so we'll let them do that.
I always got to tinker my internet to make it...
a lot of cases in this courtroom. The thing I liked least about the trial was just before I stood up to give my closing argument, the judge would say, jurors, remember, closing arguments are not evidence. But it's true. So because of that, you have to put your notebooks away. All right, so if you just put your notebooks away and just... Okay,
so let's skip past the lectures, and we'll get to Action Jackson. So I see some people requesting a poll. Let's put up a poll here. I'm just putting up days for when we'll see this. We're going to start with a verdict as to when we see it. So that'll be our first poll here, is for when we do this. And before we go, I'll get through some super chats here. Susan's Inks and Drills, thank you so much for the membership. Mr. Sharpie, still at day 30 recap. At this point, I think Lolly will pull an ace attorney. Defense has not proven their theory, therefore convict. Hope Lolly's better than that. I'll see you when I catch up later this week. Better and worse. Jack Druger, thank you for the 10 gifted memberships. Much appreciated. Ella, thank you for 10 gifted memberships. Steve A, expert timer, 119, 38, and 21, less than 22 minutes. Fair. Richard Griffin, Runkle, I've been super sick. Listening to your recaps has kept me laughing. Do you think yesterday Lolly thought, Barry, is this how you get an acquittal? Yes, other Barry. Yes, it is. Solid reference. Twisted, thank you so much for joining up. Twubble, happy to be here. Happy to have you here. Silicon 2, if Karen did it, she did it with a German Shepherd. Oh, that's yeah. Cootie Pootie Tootie, thanks to Mrs. Runkle for sharing. Thank you so much. Patty P, jurors planning their rehoming. Monica Jean, of all the lawyers I watch, what I love about you is you really explain stuff. There's been a lot of stuff in this trial. Cat in Virginia, people can't be bounced off juries in Canada. They got rid of peremptory challenges, which means that they can only remove a juror for cause, not just because you don't want that juror. So, yep. The World Wonders, off work tomorrow to go look at 100-year-old classic cars. So I get to do my weekend stream treat tonight. I want to come. I want to come look at the classic cars. Galena Ward, Mrs. Runkle, soup fun. Thank you. Muffin, cheers, Ian. It's always a party when Ian is live. Thank you. Pants says, we need to ask Peter about the Google Maps case. We really don't. Oh, God. Jackie Lindy, sorry, the better half is sick. Soup and ginger ale. Same thing I give my daughter when she is sick. Yep. Billy's Momzilla, soup and ginger ale is very thoughtful. They were requested. I was like, what can I do to make things better? She's like, soup, also ginger ale. I was like, okay. Julie cares for the next date night. Speedy recovery, my lady. I will, we'll do something. Angelique, soup and ginger ale fun. Thank you so much. Bird Queen, hi, thank you for your recaps. I'm nervous for the verdict. Me too. Dog discussions YouTube. Now I'm curious about that. I will check that out. Shannon MC, get well wishes for Mrs. Runkle. I will pass them along. Megan Weber, hope Mrs. Runkle feels better. Thanks for the recaps. I hope she does too. But so what if any side quest are we sort on? Runkle, what's on your closing arguments bingo card? Oh God. I don't have a bingo card, but maybe I should have. Panda Kitty, thank you for the YouTube membership. I don't know. Maybe I'll do a bingo card on something that isn't like a, isn't like a murder. Does Mrs. R watch your channel? No, she gets enough of me without doing that. She used to watch my channel when it was a smaller channel, and now she's like, you've got fans. They can handle that. Okay. So let's have a look here. Let's watch this opening.
Look the other way. Look the other way. 4 words that sum up the Commonwealth's entire case. 4 words that sum up the hopes of those who have tried to deceive you. Conflicts of interest? Doesn't matter. Just look the other way. Magic hairs, magic glass. Look the other way. Late night calls and Google searches, falsified affidavits, inverted videos, and butt dials galore. Just look the other way.
I was initially like the look the other way. I was like, okay, that's an odd choice of phrase. The butt dials galore. I was like, okay. Okay, I knew we were going to get there, but I like his delivery here.
That's what they want. That's what they're counting on, but the uncontrovertible fact is you have been lied to in this courtroom. And your job is to make sure you don't ever, ever look the other way. Your singular duty is to stare down the evidence and do it unflinchingly and do it unwaveringly.
Now, I'm just going to note that this is an unusual close for defense, because usually what defense does on close is to remind the jury of their obligations and then to go and tell them, like, basically to remind them about what reasonable doubt is and to like the vast majority of trials are run on reasonable doubt, issues, right? And to say, like, to remind them, you can't convict unless you are so certain. Whereas here, he's basically telling a story of what happened, and that's a very unusual thing. It's very unusual. And this is the thing. Anti-Karen people on X are saying he was horrible. They're nuts. I feel like a lot of your impression of these closing arguments will depend on your impression of who should win, right? So I feel that there's going to be a lot of bias on that. And that's on both ends, right? I think I might tell you guys that Lally did better than you think. And I expect I'll get some blowback from the chat for that, and that's fine. But I gotta give Lally the credit where he earned it, and I also gotta criticize him where he didn't. So we're gonna talk about that. But right now, Jackson does a great job.
You see, you're the only thing standing between Karen Read and the tyranny of injustice. It's a job you didn't ask for, probably a job you didn't want. But it's the greatest responsibility we have as citizens here in America. Lest the government stop answering to us and we start answering to the government.
All right. I thought that was an odd line to put in there as well. It's a little bit of an anti-government sort of line. But you know what? I hear you. Like, I'm here for it. But I'm just like, okay, that's a choice. That's an option. The other thing I'll note is we can see that they've got some of the, the McAlberts essentially in the back there. And that's an interesting choice, right? It's a clear sort of message of solidarity there. But, yeah, Jackson really said F the police. That's pretty much what it came down to there. So, okay.
And low betide any one of us who might find ourselves in the crosshairs of a Michael Proctor.
Now, he didn't pick Proctor by accident. And Shell SD says, Runkle, can you give a birthday shout out to my mom, Terry? She's a longtime follower of yours, and I'm sure she's watching. Happy birthday, Terry. I hope you have a great birthday. And yes, the Get Wrecked shirts are still available, I think, on the webpage there. So, of all the police to pick, it was not an accident that he picked Proctor, right? Proctor is going to be a figure that the jury probably doesn't like, because even if you are pro-conviction here, Proctor is gross. So he's definitely playing to that.
Preparing for today, I was reminded of a quote. It's a quote about the truth, and I want to share it with you. It is of great importance to set a resolution never to tell an untruth. There is no vice so mean, so pitiful, so contemptible, and those who permit themselves to tell a lie once find it much easier to do it a second time and a third. This falsehood of the tongue leads to that of the heart, and in time, it depraves all its good dispositions.
He's really going for the poetry here, and normally that's tough. Here, I think he's earned it. He's having fun. He's enjoying this, and I can tell you, he rehearsed this a number of times in front of the mirror.
What does that mean? It means that it's been observed that to tell an untruth, to exaggerate, to make a false claim, it's a cancer. One lie begets another, and it's a malignancy that grows over time. And that, folks, is how a cover-up is born. That's how a Massachusetts state trooper says in whispered tones to his friends when he thought no one was looking or listening, how he would make a case, how he would make it cut and dry, no matter the truth, how he would make sure to put, quote, serious charges on the girl. In other words, pin it on the girl.
And he gestures to his client.
You may ask yourself, how does this happen? How could this happen? It's 2024. Surely people aren't going to come to this courtroom, this hall of justice, and lie to us, just give us false information. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't try to cover up the truth. The Alberts, the McCabe's, Higgins, Lank, Michael Proctor, Yuri Buchanan, Brian Tully.
Now I'm just going to talk about what is really, really difficult here, which is getting the pacing right, because it's really easy when you're doing this to try to rush and to try to rush your way through it. And so you'll see a lot of closes and a lot of openings where they kind of just talk at this really fast pace, and it's kind of obnoxious. Here, he's doing it slowly and carefully. He's looking too much at his paper. I don't like that, but he doesn't actually feel as bad when he's reading as some lawyers do when they've been reading. So I'm like, I don't like that his eyes are down sometimes, but he's got a speech written.
You don't have to wonder if they would lie to support their narrative. You need only wonder how many times they did lie. Over and over and over. They and others were caught deceiving you. Big things, small things. It didn't really matter. They feared nothing.
Wow.
They'll look you in the eye and deny phone calls. They'll deny secret meetings. They'll claim that calls are butt dials and butt dials are answered. They'll show you a video and tell you left is right and right is left.
That is, I love the little dig there. I love that. Like, this is really poetic. I don't know if I'd have been able to get this out overnight the way he has.
They'll magically turn 3 pieces of plastic into 5 right before your eyes. And even when they're caught with their own lies, they won't blink, they don't sweat. They'll just look you in the eye and demand, pay no attention. You folks look the other way.
Ooh.
Ladies and gentlemen, there was a cover-up in this case, plain and simple. You'll surely say to yourself, I don't want to believe it. I don't want to believe that can happen in our community. But sadly, over the past 8 weeks, you've seen it right before your eyes. So how does a cover-up happen? How could that happen? Well, let's count the ways, shall we? Handpick your investigator. Make sure it's someone we know, someone on our side. Keep him close. Offer him help. Offer him a gift.
I love the little digs he's getting in here.
Have secret friends and family meetings. Get your story straight. Delete your call history. Make mysterious phone calls at 2:22 a.m. Delete Google searches. Monitor police activity. Get rid of evidence. Get rid of your dog. Destroy your phones. Destroy your SIM card. For the investigator, decide on a narrative early on. Don't go to the crime scene. Don't take witnesses in for questioning. Question all the witnesses together. Ignore witnesses who don't fit your narrative. Allow friends and family to contact those same witnesses. Don't record interviews. Write vague and false police reports. Omit witnesses' names. Omit witnesses' interviews altogether. Don't photograph the evidence. Don't conduct any forensics. Don't document the evidence. Don't document the
I'm
logs.
like, when's he getting to the solo
Don't create
cups?
any logs whatsoever, and don't maintain a chain of custody. Keep all the evidence in the hands of one person, and then manipulate that evidence, including videos. Don't turn over videos. Invert videos. Turn 4:16 p.m. into 5:30 p.m. in affidavits. Turn 3 pieces of taillight into 5 pieces of taillight. Delete 42 minutes of surveillance footage, hide personal relationships, make this case cut and dry, and ensure the homeowner, quote, never sees any shit because he's a Boston cop. But most importantly, pick your patsy and pin it on the girl. It's not that it could.
You see how he's, as part of the theatrics, because there's definitely theatrics, right? When he comes back and he's repeating, pin it on the girl. He's picked those quotes out and he's repeating and he's like linking that up. So this is just good delivery.
Happen. It's that every single one of those things I just mentioned did happen right in front of you. But this sort of injustice can't happen in a vacuum. So what about the prosecution? What about the Commonwealth? What does it look like when the government picks a narrative and then tries to form a prosecution around the narrative instead of the other way around? Looks a lot like this. If you don't have actual evidence, just throw every single thing you can against the wall to see what sticks. Drag her through the mud and make sure you attack her character. And that's what you saw in this case. The Commonwealth spent much of their time and resources trying to vilify Karen Read. They desperately resorted to calling witnesses to talk about Karen Read and John O'Keefe's arguments. They even stooped so low as to call the children and put them through this ordeal. All to say that John sometimes got upset because Karen was too kind, too nice, spoiled them too much. Their arguments illustrated what anybody could imagine is a normal set of ups and downs for any couple. Even on January 28th, they talked it out, they communicated, they worked out their issues, and they had a nice, affectionate evening out with their friends. And you don't have to take my word for it. Pull the tape, as they say. Look at the videos. C.F. McCarthy, Waterfall. What are the words that every single person who testified in this case used about Karen Read and John O'Keefe that night? Getting along, no issues, good mood, happy, affectionate, even lovey-dovey.
Nice.
No issues, no toxicity. They were a loving couple right up into the time Karen Read dropped him off and he walked into 34 Fairview. If an argument with a loved one is a motive for murder, folks, we're all in trouble. Speaking of which, what is the evidence that John went into the house? The Commonwealth will...
I like that, the drawing it out, because everybody has had a fight of some variety with a loved one, right? And it might be more or less spicy or whatever, but, and it might not be with your current loved one. It might be with a past one or something, but everyone's had a fight. And, most of us have not murdered a loved one. So I feel like the jury's going to be sitting there going, okay, we understand this.
Tell you, undoubtedly, no, he never went in the house. And they'll point to certain witnesses who they say didn't see him go in. Well, the question you have to ask yourself is, can you rely on that? First, these are all people who are related to or committed to the Alberts in some way or another. That all-powerful Canton family, it's easy to say, I didn't see something, because how can that really be challenged? Some actually may not have seen John walk into the house. They were in the kitchen, as you recall, from Nicole. Third, at least one witness, Brian Higgins, forgot his narrative, at least for a second, and he admitted a man did, in fact, come into the house. And then when he was caught and asked to describe that man, he had to. It was a little bit vague. You remember what he said. He was tall with dark hair. That was a telling slip of the tongue by Brian Higgins. But what's the real evidence of the unbiased data, the data that's not connected to the Albert family? How about John's Apple Health data? It shows that at 12:21 a.m., an important time, John arrived. That's established by the monotonic time clock that you heard about in this trial that was on his phone, and that represents a huge problem for the Commonwealth. It shows that he took 80 steps and ascended or descended 3 flights of stairs at that time. And that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? It matches. Walks into the house, goes directly to the basement. There's your 80 steps and your descending flights of stairs. The big problem...
So, with regards to the technical, issues, he's basically saying, look, the technical stuff matches with our theory, right? And it matches with what we've been saying. I think it's a good way of doing it. So,
for the Commonwealth is he wasn't outside at the car ascending and descending stairs, wasn't climbing on top of the car. So they'll tell you, wait, don't look at the Apple Health data, look at this other thing. called Waze. But Rick Green explained that if you apply the 3-minute offset that is built into that monatomic time, it aligns perfectly.
The other thing is that Waze is designed for cars, right? Waze is not really designed for footsteps. So I I like the way he's sort of explaining these bits of evidence and connecting these bits of evidence. And where did my poll go? I had a poll going and then it went away. Where did my poll go? Okay.
They don't want you to see that. They don't want you to pay attention. They want you to look the other way. But even more importantly, at approximately 12:32 a.m., someone holding John's phone takes another 36 steps and travels 25 meters. Why is that so important? Because by 12:32 a.m., Karen Read was gone. She had already left the location. She left at 12:30. Trooper Garino told you that Karen Read's phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at what time? 12:36. It is undisputed in this case that it's a 6-minute drive on a good day from 34 Fairview over to One Meadows. She was gone by 12:30, and John's phone was taking 36 steps and logging 25 meters at 12:32 after she'd left. So don't be fooled. John walked into that house, after which Karen drove away, and the scientific data all prove it. But also, Ryan Nagel and Heather Maxson prove it. In addition to the Apple Health data, Ryan and Heather both independently testified that they passed Karen's SUV as they drove away after talking to Julie. And Karen was alone in the SUV. John was not with her. He wasn't in the car. He wasn't standing outside the car. He wasn't sitting beside the car. He wasn't laying on the ground beside the car. He was nowhere in sight. There's only one other place that John could have been, and that's in the house.
Oh, man. It's like, where's the missing John? Oh, right. That's where he is. So, I also got to grab something here. Let's keep going.
Exactly where the Apple Health data places him. So it all fits. And Ryan was right behind her, remember, staring at her taillights, undamaged, brightly lit. That brings up another difficulty for the Commonwealth, and that's their star witness, Jennifer McCabe. You'll recall that Jennifer McCabe claimed that she was looking out the door, staring at that SUV over and over and over again from 12:29 to 12:50. She was very specific about that time frame. But we know that the SUV was gone from 34 Fairview by about 12:30.
So here's one of the big problems for Lally, which is that his case keeps changing. His case keeps he keeps tweaking his case to fit what seems to be ever-changing evidence. And so we've got Jen McCabe, who said, hey, I see this vehicle at 12:50, but then later they call evidence to say Karen Read had to be home by 12:36. So how does that work, right? How does that make sense? It's becoming a problem.
Had to be in order to connect to the Wi-Fi at 12:36. So unequivocally, Jennifer McCabe was lying about watching that SUV, and it makes you wonder why. And to add to that deceit, she was also blatantly lying about the calls to John's phone. You remember that colloquy back and forth. She said that every single one of those calls to John's phone during that time was a butt dial. How are those lies connected?
I don't think anybody believes the butt dial theory except some of the weirder people on Twitter, right? I mean, Coffin Daffer, I guess, believes the butt dial theory, but the butt dial stuff is just so weird. It just doesn't make any sense. So I like that he keeps coming back to the butt dials, because I would absolutely also be coming back to the butt dials, because it's a big problem. Everybody in town has like a prehensile butt that can, do the weirdest dialing.
And why are they connected? Jennifer McCabe knows. Was she butt dialing John over and over? Or was someone looking for John's phone that went missing? Let's talk for a second about what actually happened in the time leading up to everyone going to 34 Fairview.
And why would she be looking for the phone? Well, if John O'Keefe has died in the, or has suffered a serious head injury inside the home, well, you don't want the phone to be found in the home. You don't want them to locate the phone via whatever and determine that it was in the house. So you gotta find it. It makes sense.
Brian Albert, Brian Higgins show up drunk at the waterfall. They had been drinking in the afternoon. You know about the flirtatious texts that were sent between Karen Reed and Brian. Higgins was clearly pining over Karen, but for her, the flirtation had ran its course. It was done. She was happy and committed to John. You could see that in her actions with John that night. You don't have to guess. Brian.
It had run its course because he was a stage 5 clinger. And she was like, nope, no, thank you. We're just going to go ahead and skip that shit. So, she was like, Dunzo, not doing that.
Higgins, however, you can see in his actions, he wasn't quite so satisfied and he wasn't done. His text message, well, meaning, what the hell, Karen? What about me? Seemed aggressive, seemed annoyed. He didn't like being ignored. That was pretty clear. So he's 5 or 6 whiskeys deep into the night by this time, and she continued to ignore him.
Both Jackson and Lally are going to come back to the how much were people drinking.
Then oddly, Higgins, who doesn't know John all that well, seems to want to coax John to 34 Fairview. I draw your attention to the waterfall tape if you want to take another look at it. It's at the 11:57 mark, between 11:57 and 11:58. Take a look at that.
This is why I don't like that she said, I'm not letting you have your notebooks during this. She's like, you can't have your notebooks during this because this is not evidence. And I'm like, why not let them have their notebooks to write down things like 11:57? Because how's the jury supposed to remember 11:57, tomorrow, right? So let them have their notebooks. I would have just instructed them on what it is and isn't okay to look, to write down.
That tape. He's just about to leave. Higgins is just about to leave. He points over at John and he motions for him. Come on, come with me. And then at 12:20, he texts him, you coming here? This is a person he doesn't really know and didn't really talk to that entire night. Ask yourself, why was Higgins so insistent that John go to 34 Fairview that night? And then there's that sparring and fighting that he and Brian Albert were engaged in. Of all the things they could be doing, this is what they were doing just minutes before John O'Keefe walked into that house at 34 Fairview.
They were playing grab ass. I mean, he's trying to make it look like they're sparring and whatever else. They're being a couple of idiots. I thought this one, I was like, this line of argument has never really gripped me, and I didn't like this part of his close.
We know that once John actually did walk in the door, it's about 2 steps, 4 feet or so, 2 steps for an adult male to reach that basement door. Remember, everybody was gathered in the kitchen. That's what Nicole Albert said. And every single witness agreed that at some point, Brian Higgins and Brian Albert left the group and went to another room. Where did they go? Where did they go together? Another important point. Chloe was not upstairs. Brian Albert slipped in one of his testimony that he provided. Quote, I was watching Chloe downstairs, monitoring her because of the other people in the house. She's not good with strangers. Remember that testimony.
I love the way he delivers that. She's not good with strangers. Because if you're thinking that those are dog bites and not Lexus bites, then you're wondering, how does John O'Keefe get the dog bites? And I mean, I'm going to say I feel really bad for John O'Keefe's family, because they're sitting there, they're not likely to be happy with this regardless. It's got to be, it's got to be brutal, especially because I think it's fairly clear they believe Karen Read did it. And, I don't know what, I don't know what's going on. So
what happened next? We absolutely know that John was in the house. The data, Ryan, Heather, they all established that. We know that John ascended or descended stairs. We know that Brian Higgins and Brian Albert excused themselves. How long does it take to have a crossword? How long does it take to have a fight? How long would it take for Brian Higgins to say to John, your girl's been texting me. A push, a punch, a fall, pull Chloe off his arm, and now it's done. What is that? 5 seconds? 10? Doesn't take long at all.
I thought this was like that, just he's communicating his theory of what happened, right? A fight happens and it's over in a second. And these fights can be really, really quick. I've seen video of these kinds of manslaughter pictures and so forth. And, they happen real fast.
And then the panic sets in. It wasn't intended to go that far, but what's done is done. And then some very, very odd things start happening at the Albert household.
Yeah, I don't like
Very
how much
odd
he's rating.
indeed. What do we know? We know through the testimony and key swipes that Brian Higgins very oddly goes directly to Canton Police Department. Why would he do that? After a night of drinking and partying, why go to CPD when you're drunk? What was so important there? He couldn't even get his own story straight. First he said it was administrative work, then he said he was moving cars, then he said it was a factor of both. Is it both? Was it neither? Or was he there to gather intel? Ask yourself, why go? But the odd things keep piling up, and here's another. Chloe was the Albert family pet. Not only did she appear to be gone from the house that morning on January 29th, nobody saw her there. Even Jim McCabe admitted, I didn't see her there. But they actually got rid of the dog altogether. Within months of this incident, the dog was gone, out of the house, rehomed, never to be seen again. This was a dog they had had for 7 years.
I'm just going to tell you, it would take a lot to get me to get rid of Potter or Zora. It's just not happening, right? Let's say Mrs. Runkle, let's say she died. And if I was, in the circumstance of dating, which, this is a way off hypothetical. We're not, but if I met new person and brought them over and they were like, hey, you're cool, but the dog's gotta go. I'd be like, great story. Pack your shit. The dogs are staying. Dogs live here. You're the guest, right? So, it's really weird to me that Chloe just up and vanishes, right? Because the dogs are my dogs are family. So, yep.
Also a dog who had a bite history. Why was it so important to get rid of that dog? Was there something about the dog they did not want law enforcement to find out? Recall what Dr. Russell said. She's seen up to 1,000 animal attacks. In her expert opinion, John's right arm, those injuries are from an animal, quote, most likely a large dog. And Dr. Russell's testimony, I'll remind you, was undisputed by any witness for the Commonwealth. But there are more odd and unexplained things. After a night of drinking and hanging out and partying, after being together for the entire day, at 2:22 a.m., Brian Albert decides to call Brian Higgins. That call was missed, but 17 seconds later, Higgins calls Brian back, and they speak for 22 seconds. Now that
I think that he said that was also a butt dial or whatever. You know, this 22-second call is like, we can't have much of a conversation in 22 seconds. 22 seconds is lots of time. So
call is odd and suspicious enough in and of itself, the fact that the call was made. But what's even more incriminating is that both men, both of them, lied about the calls happening. They both claim astonishingly that those calls are, you probably say it with me, they're butt dials. Amazing. But Albert and Higgins take it a step.
I would have gone, this is where I, being me, would have dropped the line of, you know, these are the most, they're like, Canton has the most talkative butts in town or something like that. Because, you know, just to really, really emphasize things.
Step further. Not only did they claim that they were making calls as butt dials, but they were answering calls as butt dials. And Higgins seemed awfully defensive about that call, didn't he? Remember on cross-examination when I was asking him, can you have a conversation in 22 seconds? He unequivocally said, no, that's impossible. It's not reasonable. You can't do it. Well, let's test that out. Hey, did you make it over to Canton? Yep. Haven't been any calls. Nobody knows a thing. All right, don't talk to anybody until we talk again. Okay, fine. And by the way, come back over. I need help moving something heavy. How long did that take? 15 seconds?
Let's go back and watch that and time it. All right, so.
Do it. Well, let's test that out. Hey.
All right, so we're at 55 or 54 seconds.
Hey, did you make it over to Canton? Yep. Haven't been any calls. Nobody knows a thing. All right, don't talk to anybody until we talk again. Okay, fine. And by the way, come back over. I need help moving something heavy.
About 16 seconds. So, 16, 18 seconds, definitely under the 22 seconds. So, that was good. Now, during the cross-examination, the judge wouldn't let him have the 22 seconds to count things off. They wouldn't let him do it. But he snuck it in. Snuck it in front of the jury.
How long did that take? 15 seconds? Maybe? But the odd behavior isn't done yet. 5 minutes after that call that we just talked about, Jennifer McCabe is on her phone at her house, Google searching how long it takes for someone to die in the cold. That was at 2:27 a.m. That timeline seems to fit, doesn't it? And it fits a very telling and a very clear story. That search became a focal point of the Commonwealth's entire case. This case was starting to look a lot more like the defense of Jennifer McCabe than anything else. That's probably because there is no innocent explanation for that Google search at 2:27 a.m. None. At the end of the day, clearing away all the confusion, the Commonwealth's experts were left with two things that are true. First, neither of their experts could absolutely rule out that Jennifer McCabe made that search at 2:27 a.m. Neither. And second, the only person to use the actual phone model, the actual data, and the actual precise operating system was Rick Green.
So this is the battle of the experts, right? He's trying to say, my expert is the best because he used the same operating system. Their experts couldn't tell you one way or the other Mine. Now, I feel like he is a little, he's a little shading what Lally's experts said, because I think Lally's experts were pretty confident that it wasn't made at 227. But that's fine. He can do that. So, yeah.
And he was clear. That search was at or before 2:27 a.m. And then it was deleted. So what else was going on at or around this same time when all this suspicious activity was happening at the Albert house and the McCabe house? 3 minutes after that search and 8 minutes after the Albert Higgins 2:22 a.m. call, Brian Loughran drives down the street in his snowplow. And he told you that there is no...
Now, I would have, when he said Brian Loughran, I would have said Brian Lucky Loughran. I would have put Lucky in there because I would have.
No body laying on the lawn at 34 Fairview at 2:30 in the morning. Importantly, he didn't just simply say he didn't see a body, he wasn't paying attention. He said there was no body there. He knows the property, he knows the owners, he's grown up with these folks, he passes by all the time, not once, not twice, 3 passes. There was no body on that lawn, period, at 2:30 a.m.
I would have said he would have seen it from Frankentruck with its big lights. So, and guys, if you're watching this while you're asleep in bed or while you're getting frisky with your, significant other, make sure to have your butt hit the like button and maybe the share button and the subscribe button. Because if you've got that talented, canted butthole, then...
And what other suspicious thing happened that night? By 3:30 a.m., someone moved a Ford Edge in front of the very area that would obstruct the view of where John's body would ultimately be discovered. Who's the only person in this case that you've heard about with a Ford Edge? Brian Albert. Remember, as you're thinking about this, the basement at 34 Fairview is serviced by a bulkhead. It's a quick and convenient door to the backyard. And that backyard is serviced by a side fence. And that side fence is easily accessible to the front yard at the side of the house. Which side of the house? The side where John's body was found.
So what he's doing here is he's painting a story, right? How does John get out of the house? Well, they pull him through that bulkhead. They drag him out into the backyard. They drag him around and out to the front yard. Right now, the jury is hopefully sitting there thinking about this in their head, going, okay. Because the jury might have been thinking, how did they drag him up the flight of stairs, right? But now they're thinking, okay, that's a good way to get a body out. Vez from Quebec butt typing this super chat. Thank you so much. I think they've got a very, like, he's filling in the story, right? He's explaining these bits of evidence and telling us what's going on with those.
And by 6 a.m., John's body was in fact now outside. While this flurry of suspicious activity was going on with the Alberts and the McCabes, what's happening with Karen? All she knows at this point, think about it, at approximately 2:21, she dropped off John. He walked into 34 Fairview, and that's all she knows. She knows nothing else that was going on. So what was she left to think? He goes in to check the party out.
I mean, I guess.
But all of a sudden, he's not coming back. He's not responding. Minutes start to pass. 1 minute turns to 2, 2 turn to 10. Where is he? Why isn't he responding?
And the thing is it seems to me that Karen had a theory about where he was and why he wasn't responding, which was that the theory was probably that he was getting with someone else, right? The theory was probably that he was, maybe flirting with somebody else, maybe boning down with someone else. And so that's that seems to be why she's sending him messages like accusing him of being a pervert, is because she's like, oh crap, maybe that girl from Aruba is there, maybe, whatever else, right? Because why else wouldn't he respond? Why else is he, yep.
She's sitting in the cold, dark, freezing outside in the car. Naturally, she's perturbed. Being perturbed turns into being peeved. Being peeved eventually turns into being pissed.
I love the perturbed to peeved to pissed, right? Yeah.
At 12:30, Karen's mad. She's left 34 Fairview to make a point, but she's still texting and calling. What could she reasonably be thinking at this point? What's going through her mind? 12:33 turns into 12:34. I can't believe he'd do this to me. 12:34 turns into 12:35. Where is he? Why aren't you answering, John? 12:35 turns to 12:36. Jesus Christ. I'm calling and you're not answering. Where are you? Pick up the phone. But there's still no answer. There's still no response. By 12:37, she's getting furious. She does not know that something has happened to John. She does not know that.
And this makes sense, right? This is it's a story that makes sense, because if she thinks she's killed John, why is she sending these pissed off messages, right? Why is she sending these angry messages if she thinks that he's dead, right? And Lally is going to kind of play the opposite game, and it's weird.
So she leaves the first angry voicemail. Illustrates frustration, aggravation, all the normal responses anybody might have, you and I might have. But little did she know. The next open voicemail has Karen parking at John's garage after she gets home. You can hear her heels clicking across the garage floor. For all she knows at this point, John's just drunk, he's been partying, he's hanging out, just forgot about her, blowing her off. But John's still not responding, and as the minutes tick by, Karen becomes increasingly upset.
Can you also imagine how much it would suck if, let's assume she's innocent here, right? And I know not everyone agrees with that, but let's assume she's innocent. Can you imagine the guilt that you're going to be experiencing when you're sitting there and, your last words to your partner after they died were angry messages? That's I always kind of think about this because I end up dealing with, so I try not to have my last words with Mrs. Runkle be fighty words. Like if we've got a thing that we're arguing about, even if it's minor, it's like, try to say something nice at the end, right? Try to hey, you're dropping somebody off at work. Maybe you had a discussion along the way about hey, Runkle, you've got attention deficit. Did you do the thing? And I'm like, shit, I didn't do the thing. But, it's like, let's talk, let's say something nice before we go, just in case, right? Yeah.
Other voicemails that you heard. How could he do this? Why is he ignoring me? Why is he ignoring the kids? Those are the thoughts bearing down on Karen Read as she sat in an empty house late at night by herself. Ladies and gentlemen, she did not know what had happened to John. But within the next voicemail,
that's
quickly
insane,
learned
Laura.
what she was thinking and what she was feeling. Now it's 5:23 a.m. She's woken up. She's realized that he hasn't come home and he hasn't responded to a single text, not a single call. And anger quickly turns to panic and abject fear. She's so...
Nikki, I'm so sorry. Saying mine and my husband's last words to each other were a terrible fight. He was murdered. The guilt never goes away. I'm sorry, Nikki. I don't think he would have held it against you. So...
so distraught, she reaches out to him again. John, where the fuck are you? She says through tears and desperation. And at 6:03, the question was answered, and her worst fears are realized when she finds his body laying, dying in the cold in Brian Albert's front yard.
And for the people who are sort of judging her facial expression, I get a different read on it. I get that she's trying to sort of hold on and is kind of dissociating in this moment. She's sort of staring. She's got very regulated breathing. I don't like that the camera is on her, but it looks to me like she's just kind of struggling to get through this moment.
You heard her. You can feel the grief. You can feel the raw anguish. You could see it. You don't have to wonder the emotional journey that Karen traveled that night. You can see it in the video. You can hear it in the audio. From the time he left her and walked into 34 Fairview and she called, she reached out 53 times. She called him 53 times before finding his body. Think about that. The Commonwealth wants you to believe that she murdered this man. And then after that murder, she called him not once, not twice, 53 times. It makes no sense. What does make sense is that she emotionally moved from anger, then to panic, then to grief. So back at 5:07, when she began her search looking for John, she backed out of the garage, and what would happen next would change the entire course of this case. As she backed out of that garage, she hit John's Traverse and cracked her right rear taillight. Folks, the Commonwealth has one job to do in this courtroom. It's an immutable responsibility to provide you with
Now
the
we're
truth.
getting to the reasonable doubt.
That's it. Not to win the case, but to seek justice and to do it through the truth. Ask yourself, did you get that truth from the Commonwealth? The Commonwealth continually tried to tell you that.
Did you get that truth from the Commonwealth? Jackson's mad. Jackson is mad because that's a shot at Lally, right? That's a shot at Lally.
That video showed that the SUV came close to John's Traverse, and it took us showing you the video to unequivocally establish that Karen hit that car and cracked her taillight at 5:07. You can almost hear an audible gasp in the courtroom when we finally showed you the actual video.
Reminding the jury of their reactions, right? Remember
I'm only
how
going to
you
show
felt
you one
when you saw
series
it.
of exhibits during my entire closing, but it's that important. And it's this. Look at the condition of her taillight when she pulls out of the driveway at 5:07. That taillight, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully here. That taillight is cracked, but it's not completely damaged. And if there
And you look at the taillight, you can see all the red, right? You can see so much red in this image. So much red.
was any question in your mind about the level of damage to that taillight at 5:07, all doubt was extinguished. When Dighton Police Officer Barrows walked into this courtroom, he's a sworn officer. He's not associated with Canton. He's not associated with the Alberts. He's not associated with the McCabe's. He doesn't know Michael Proctor. In other words, he doesn't answer to any of these folks. He's an outsider and he's completely independent. And his words were the following, quote,
Okay, that was, I'm just going to...
he's an outsider and he's completely independent.
John's got an interesting facial expression there. That just caught me as it was panning by. I was like, why's he got that facial? Like, what's with that? So, interesting.
And his words were the following, quote,
I think he's
taillight
pissed,
was
but-
not completely damaged. It was cracked. A piece was missing, but not.
Oh, sorry, Paul. Brain fart. I'm awful with names. So, yes, Paul, John's brother. Sorry about that. I'm just awful with names. Paul. Brain. But yeah, he's got like that sort of that smile there. I think that his smile is because he's pissed. I think that is a like trying not to
Independent. And his words were the following, quote, that taillight was not.
I think he's kind of like a that asshole expression as opposed to anything else. Yeah, maybe I've got the brain worms.
Not completely damaged. It was cracked. A piece was missing, but not completely damaged. Take a look at this photograph and tell me, which one looks like Officer Barros's description? The one on the left or the one on the right? The reconstructed light on the left is what that light looked like before it was in Trooper Proctor's possession. Remember that. That's what it looked like before Trooper Proctor had access to the SUV. And you have an independent police officer telling you so.
I think that is a really, really strong message here, right? So we'll see.
You'll recall that after John's body was discovered, Lank, very good friend of the Alberts, walked into Brian Albert's house and had an off-the-record meeting with him. No one's ever going to know exactly what that meeting was about, what they discussed, because that interview, like everything else in this case, it wasn't recorded. It wasn't memorialized. But we do know that shortly thereafter, the Canton Police Department was recused from the matter entirely.
It's excellent use.
And the case was assigned to one Michael Proctor. You have to believe that when the Alberts found that out, they thought they hit the lottery. They thought they hit the lottery. What are the chances? The department where my brother works, that would have been great to investigate this case, but that department's been recused. That's tough luck. But the guy who catches the case is Michael Proctor, a guy we go back with for decades.
Our close friend.
At such a break, they probably thought, when this is over, we need to get that dude a gift.
Oh, man. I will admit, I laughed out loud when I saw that the first time. I laughed again.
At such a break, they probably thought, when this is over, we need to get that dude a gift. Oh, wait a minute. They didn't think that. They said it out loud.
Damn. Proctor's a gift to the defense. Proctor's, bad behavior is absolutely a gift to the defense. So,
but still, you've got to imagine that the Alberts had to be stressed. What with that whole thing about a dead body being on their lawn? That might get some attention, and they had to be wondering, will he set up a crime scene? Is he going to come into the house? Is he going to search the house? Is he going to send in a forensics team? Is he going to interview witnesses? Is he going to take us to the station?
Who are the people with laptops? That's the press. Those are the media.
Will he take our phones? Will he look at our communications? Will he look at our Google searches? Will he look at our early morning phone calls? Is he going to look in the basement? And Michael Proctor answered every single one of those questions resoundingly. Nope. He's a Boston cop too.
I love the way he ties in those little key moments and he assembles all of that together. I think gifts under $50 are allowed, but you have to inform your superiors. I don't think that they'd be allowed to take or contemplate gifts from people connected to an active investigation. No.
And with that, Michael Proctor didn't draw a thin blue line. He erected a tall blue wall. A wall that you can't scale. A wall that Karen Reed certainly couldn't get over. A wall between us and them. A place
I love the metaphor.
Are not invited. We protect our own. It's us or it's them. And by the way, who's she after all? Nobody. An outsider. This is going to be easy. Or so they thought. Let's look at what Michael Proctor actually did and did not do in this case. One of the consistent issues that's come up throughout this trial is how evidence always seems to be changing and evolving when in Michael Proctor's hands or somebody in his orbit.
I probably would have been unable to resist the urge at this point to say, you may also have heard, the Commonwealth story change and evolve, because it has, right? It very clearly has. So
if it happens once, let's chalk it up to a mistake. Twice, it's starting to look a little bit like incompetence. If that happens every single time, it becomes intentional, which means it becomes corruption.
Corruption
The
is
defense
a
spent
big
some
word to
time,
drop
we
here.
spent some time discussing the toe time that Michael Proctor swore to in affidavits. There was a reason that we believed it was so important, and I want to talk about that for just a quick second. Because this was a concerted effort by Michael Proctor to falsify the time the car was seized, so that no one would know that he actually had possession of the car before the first pieces of taillight were ever discovered at the scene. But he got caught. And when he did, the best he could come up with was it was a typo. Like a dozen times, a typo. You'll remember what that testimony was. The truth is that car was in Michael Proctor's possession from about 4:12 in the afternoon. He said it was 4:16 when he finally had to tell the truth, or some version of the truth. Those first pieces of taillight were not found until after 5:45 p.m. That is the very fact that Michael Proctor was trying to hide by those falsified affidavits, saying he didn't seize the car until 5:30.
You see the line here is basically they're trying to say that it was impossible to have planted the plastic, but he lied about that. Why would he lie about the timing if it didn't matter, right? People lie about things to gain some advantage. And what's the advantage of that hour? Well, the advantage is it lets him plant the plastic. I think he's doing a really good job establishing all of this. And, was a typo? Yeah. And in this place, typo? Yeah.
But that wasn't Michael Proctor's only manipulation of the investigation. What about Brian Loughran? You met him. Michael Proctor did his level best to not just hide evidence, but to hide human beings from you and from us. Michael Proctor was informed that the plow drivers were out that night. There would be a witness, potentially along 34 Fairview, at the exact times in question. Even Michael Trotta expressly told Michael Proctor that 34 Fairview had in fact been plowed that morning, and by whom. Proctor not only did not interview Brian Loughran, he never disclosed his name in a single report. He hid him. This is a witness who was literally on 34 Fairview at the time in question, where a body was found on the lawn.
And I'm just going to note, this is one of the things where a great lawyer can find this stuff through hustle, right? Jackson figures this out through superior hustle, and that could make all the difference. Yeah, got a lucky to toast lucky. So,
wouldn't you want to get the truth from an eyewitness? Wouldn't you want to seek that out? Not if you're Michael Proctor, a close friend of the Alberts. If it were up to Proctor, you literally never would have heard of or from Brian Loughran. That's a scary prospect.
It's all right.
I want to touch briefly on the additional physical evidence, or some additional physical evidence presented by the Commonwealth in this case. You'll recall Christina Hanley. She established to a scientific certainty that the glass on the bumper, which was told to you in opening statement, was going to have something to do with this case. The glass on the bumper was going to match that cocktail glass. She told you unequivocally the glass on the bumper did not match the cocktail glass. They came from two different sources. The glass on the bumper has nothing to do with the cocktail glass. So that glass on the bumper had to get there somehow. It didn't get there by being broken from the cocktail glass. See the point? It had to get on the bumper somehow. It didn't jump up there by itself. And what's really interesting is that there was one piece on the bumper, only one, that matched something else in the case. It was a perfect match to a piece of glass that was supposedly found at the scene. Who do you think had possession of that matching glass? Michael Proctor.
I also like two things that he did there. One, he's drawing the Michael Proctor connection again. The other thing is that he's very specifically saying the Commonwealth in their opening promised you this about this bit of evidence, and that was not true.
So the glass on the bumper had to be placed there. And the only person who had anything close to matching the pieces that had to be placed there is Michael Proctor. You do the math. That leads us to the magic hair. The Commonwealth spent a lot of time bringing in experts about mitochondrial DNA and maternal DNA lines and comparative analyses, and all that sounds really great and really sciencey, except for the fact that it just doesn't matter. Why? Because you would have to believe that that little hair, tiny, tiny little hair, barely perched on the side of that SUV survived nearly 75 miles of a raging blizzard outside.
I love his, and that sounds really sciencey. Oh, Lolly's going to try to deal with the hair on that too. We're going to see how Lolly tries to deal with that.
That would be a magic hair indeed. That magic hair means nothing. The DNA means nothing, and that's because the hair was from somewhere else. It certainly was not from a motor vehicle incident at 34 Fairview on January 29th. That hair was placed there. The DNA on the outside of the taillight housing also merits very little discussion. John's DNA would be expected to be found all over that SUV, inside, outside, the exterior, the interior, everything he touched would have had his DNA on it. Here's what's actually important about that DNA. No DNA was found on the interior of that taillight. The taillight that they now claim crashed into his arm and shattered. No blood was found anywhere on that taillight or any taillight pieces. And no tissue was found anywhere on that taillight or any taillight pieces. But we're to believe that that taillight literally exploded on John's arm at 25 miles an hour with 1,000 pounds of pressure. We talked about the evidence doing very funny things when in Proctor's possession or the possession of somebody in his orbit. Now think about the videos that you saw. How many videos appear to be somehow manipulated or altered? Just about every single one of them. Look at the video of the Sally port. Let's take that one, for example, that grainy one. It's missing the exact time that would show the condition of the taillight when it was pulled in to the Sally port.
The Sally port video is so bad. And this, I mean, if Canton PD or if this police department isn't immediately unking their security system, their security cameras, then I don't know what's going on, because like literally they should be on that right now, because they got to pull that and make sure it's not set to motion activated, but just to consistent recording. This is basic B stuff for this, to make sure it's not set to invert. Like, all of this is ridiculous.
Pretty important time, wouldn't you think? Did someone not want you to see what the condition of the taillight was at that exact time? But the good news is there's a second video. It's much clearer. And it's from the same time frame. We didn't get that one for about 2.5 years into the investigation. Literally, it was after the trial started that one was turned over. And this is important. The Commonwealth introduced you to a person by the name of Yuri Buchanan. They presented video showing what was clearly the right side of the car. They asked questions about the right side of the car. You'll recall, Mr. Lally asked Sergeant Buchanan, did you or Trooper Proctor ever go at, or near the right side of that taillight? And while he was asking the question, what appeared to be the right side of the car was looking at you. The video was still up. Buchanan paused, turned earnestly into the microphone, stared at you and said, never. We never went anywhere around that taillight. while he was showing you the right side of the car. And that trick might have worked until we got up to cross-examine him. And only then, on the second day of his testimony, did he have to admit that the video was actually inverted. It was backward. And it was cleverly inverted at that. The timestamp had the proper orientation, which means that timestamp had to be removed, the video inverted, and the timestamp placed back on it.
I don't think that's true. I don't think it's true that they removed it. I think that the video was just misconfigured and recorded inverted. But if the jury thinks that they did that, then we're over. We're done, right? Because I don't think that's actually what happened with that video. But
which means that was done intentionally. That was not a mistake. And when caught in that obvious fabrication, Buchanan doubled down and said, it's exactly the same. You remember that back and forth. It's exactly the same, he said, as if we're stupid. Is it exactly the same, or is it exactly opposite? Ladies and gentlemen.
That is a great line. Is it exactly the same, or is it exactly opposite? That's amazing, right?
You were lied to. There is no other way to say it. It's inexcusable. It's abhorrent. But it's also a paradigm of everything that the investigators have been willing to do in this case. Lie, obfuscate, manipulate, alter. And when they're caught, they just excuse it away. Doesn't matter. It's the same thing. What's the big deal? Just look the other way. And don't forget, Buchanan is Proctor's supervisor. And he was in that little group chat where Karen Reed's naked photos were being searched for.
That's fine. We can disagree.
You know the saying about the apple falling from the tree. Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't even started talking about the taillight yet. You'll recall that at the very beginning of this case, you were introduced to no fewer than 5 CPD officers very early on who searched the scene. None of them, not a single one, found any taillight material at the scene. 0. Stephen Seraph, Sean Good, Stephen Mulaney, Michael Lank, Paul Gallagher, they were all there.
Not
They were
worried.
all walking right around there. They were all looking. They were searching with their eyes. They were searching with their hands. Some said they were searching with their feet. They even used tools, a leaf blower. Not one piece of bright red taillight material was at the scene, not a single piece, but incredibly, over the course of the next 3 weeks, according to Michael Proctor, 47 pieces of taillight material would end up being found, some of which were the size of a salad plate.
That's also a bit of an exaggeration, but it's still funny.
The CERT team shows up later on January.
Okay, if I may have missed that. The yellow timestamp he slipped and admitted to was removed. The blue readable time was added before trial. It's possible. If they did flip it, then they should be in jail, honestly. If they did flip the video, and then they should go to jail on that. And yeah, I suspect that my inclination is that it was probably accidental. My video camera has a button to flip it, and the reason why it has a button to flip it is because you might have the video turned upside down, and that's just, so
January 29th, and according to O'Hara, the first few pieces of taillight were found about 5:45. And here's some interesting testimony that you heard. Who else was there? Who did O'Hara say was there? Well, he said his team was there. We certainly expected that, but then he said there were others. These other mysterious figures, some from Canton
right to
PD,
left.
some from the Massachusetts State Police, that he could not account for.
Sometimes these cameras are set up to look at a mirror, and that makes a good reason to have them have the right to left flip option. So, yeah.
Heavy coats, big masks, hats. Even Lieutenant O'Hara could not tell who
I have
was
not
who,
made a saddle.
but he did note Canton police officers were there who were unaccounted for. Massachusetts state troopers were there unaccounted for. And during that search that was overseen by Trooper Tully, Proctor's supervisor, 3 pieces of taillight material were found. That's super important, and I want to concentrate on that for a second. O'Hara said all three pieces were in an area about 12 inches square. That's an area
I
about
agree.
as big
That's
as your
super
dinner plate.
deceptive.
Tully, however, claimed that one red piece was found. About 3 feet away from that was a shoe. About 1 to 2 feet from that was a clear piece of plastic, and a few feet away from that was a red piece of plastic. So we have red, clear, and red over the span of about, added up, probably 10 or 12 feet. Ladies and gentlemen, both of those things cannot be true. Somebody is taking liberties with the facts. Then Lieutenant Tully comes to court.
Somebody's taking liberties with the facts is a gentle way of describing when he's already called people liars. So,
and makes this big grand gesture
saddle
of
is
opening all
not
these
likely.
evidence bags. These two evidence bags in particular represent exactly what we're talking about. Those three pieces, red, clear, red. They're marked, they're sealed, they look official. They're not Stop and Shop bags, thank God. At least they've moved up from that. They've even got evidence tape on them. Who knew? There's evidence tape around here. So this must be real evidence, right? It must be real evidence in this case. And
I love the snark. I love the snark.
after making that big theatrical display, he opens up the bag with the red pieces and he pulls 2 pieces out. That's okay. Put the two red pieces together. Good so far. Then he opens up the second bag under Mr. Lowley's questioning. And you remember he hesitated just a second. Opened that bag and pulled out 1 piece of clear plastic. Then pulled out a second piece of clear plastic with no explanation as to how that could have possibly happened. And he quickly returned all 4 of those back into the bag, sealed them up, and we're done for the day. The next day, I asked about that evidence again. I asked him to open up that bag with the red pieces, and he did the same thing. Pulled out 2 red pieces of plastic. I said, you'll recall this, I said, look deeper, look closer, sir. Pull everything out of that bag. Would he have had I not suggested it? And then he pulled a 3rd piece of red plastic out of the bag.
Again, suggesting that this guy is outright deceiving the jury in court in front of their faces, right?
Bag. So miraculously, Trooper Tully's 3 pieces of plastic became 5 pieces of plastic right before your eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, the forces at play that multiplied those pieces of plastic inside those evidence bags are the same forces at play that multiplied the pieces of plastic at 34 Fairview.
Now, here's the thing, is the jury could easily believe that the thing that multiplied the pieces of plastic was like somebody put something on top of the evidence bag and they broke, right? That's plausible. But he is managing to spin this really well. Really well.
Think about that. Let that sink in for a second. How easy is it? That's not sloppiness. That's evidence manipulation. That's how over the course of 3
he's
weeks,
spinning it well.
those pieces of plastic go from 0 to 3 to 5 to 47. Ever increasing in size with every single search. Now, knowing all that, ask yourself the looming question, who had access to that taillight, the cracked taillight? Who was it? Go back and watch the Sally Port video. I'll give you the timestamp, 5:37. And see it for yourself. We know that Trooper
Again, they can't write this down, so what's the timestamp going to do?
Proctor, with binder in hand, walked by himself. Once we corrected the video from being inverted, you can see that he walked back by himself to the right rear taillight where nobody could see what he was doing. Higgins' own key swipes put him in the Sally Port that same afternoon and evening. And then the Sally Port video magically skips and Chief Berkowitz appears right next to Proctor at the back of that vehicle in the same spot, and they walk out of the Sally Port together. Where were they going? Remember O'Hara? Unidentified troopers and Canton cops were at the search at 34 Fairview. How hard is it to drop a piece of plastic? We spent a long time talking about the compromised and altered and tampered and manipulated evidence, and now I want to switch and talk a little bit about the true facts in this case, because you did hear some true evidence and true facts. The Commonwealth presented about 67, maybe more, witnesses.
I like how he's He's like, maybe more. He's like, I lost count. So did you. We all lost count because this trial sucks.
And expended 30 plus days of trial and 9 weeks of your life. Maybe we're in the 10th week. For what? It should be relatively simple, right? The Commonwealth claims that Karen Reed pulled up to 34 Fairview. John got out of the car. She reversed into him and hit him. And then she drove home. That's 4 facts. It's just 4 facts. That's all it is. What evidence do they actually have to prove that that SUV ever hit John? The answer is none. They don't have any. There's no evidence whatsoever that Karen Reed's vehicle ever struck John O'Keefe or that Karen Reed ever wanted to strike John O'Keefe. In fact, every single piece of material evidence in this case unequivocally proves the opposite. John went into that house. That SUV was not damaged by hitting John, and John's injuries did not come from being hit by a car. That's what the evidence actually shows.
And the thing is I agree with him. I don't know if
Commonwealth knows that, and they've known it for a long time, and Proctor knows that. And because of that, the Commonwealth just resorts to character assassination and talking for weeks on end about the snow. Let's talk about what the real evidence actually shows, the unassailable science. Let's talk about the truth. Concerning John's injuries first, the Commonwealth's own medical examiner, Dr. Scortibello, could not conclude that John was hit by a car. Think about that. And she would not even say that it was a homicide. She told you without any dispute in this case, quote, evidence pointing toward one manner of death is no more compelling than evidence of a competing manner of death, end quote. Her words, not mine. She went on to say it's just as likely that he was punched and fell backward. His injuries are consistent with that. In fact, in her expert opinion, his injuries are consistent with a physical altercation, as she testified, but they are not, in her words, not classical injuries from an auto pedestrian accident.
Good
that
quote.
By itself is reasonable doubt.
I don't think they could, no.
But the evidence and the truth goes far further. We introduced you to not one.
I don't know why they didn't show the interview, and it might have been excluded. I don't know.
But 2 thoroughly credentialed medical examiners or medical experts, Dr. Sheridan and Dr. Russell, both of whom said John's arm injury is consistent with an animal attack. Dr. Russell studied, diagnosed, and treated up to 1,000 animal wounds. She's an expert in animal wounds, and she was unequivocal. Those wounds are from an animal, likely a large dog, which means that John was attacked inside the home where Chloe was. There is no other possibility. And Dr. Sheridan, for his part, with thousands of 13,000 autopsies under his belt, decades of experience as the chief medical examiner, who's triple credentialed in anatomical, forensic, and neuropathology. He told you that John's injuries are inconsistent with a motor vehicle accident or incident. They're consistent, however, with a physical altercation. In layman's terms, the science proves John was beaten.
Jury questions are likely to be televised, yes. We just haven't seen them yet.
That also is reasonable doubt and should end this case. But the facts and evidence don't stop there. 2 of the most highly educated and highly qualified engineers you'll ever meet, Dr. Dan Wolf and Dr. Andrew Rentschler, mechanical engineer and a biomechanist. They reviewed this case. They did testing, they did analysis, they evaluated the case scientifically. They were not hired by the defense, not by the Commonwealth. They're completely 100% independent of any party in this case. And they were equally available, by the way, to the Commonwealth. They could have called them.
Why don't they want to call the independent crash experts? Oh, right, because their evidence is terrible for the Commonwealth.
They explained that John's injuries were not caused by being hit by Miss Reed's SUV, and that the SUV was not damaged by coming in contact with John O'Keefe's body. That should end the inquiry right there. both sides of the equation.
He's got
From
more
a
time.
physics, engineering, and biomechanical standpoint, they established that John O'Keefe was not struck by Karen Reed's vehicle, period. And that is yet another fact that establishes reasonable doubt and should put an end to this case.
The FBI paid.
So instead of calling the ARCA experts, which they had available to them, the Commonwealth chose to introduce you to Trooper Joe Paul.
Okay. I'm just gonna say I love this little bit of shade.
Available to them, the Commonwealth chose to introduce you to Trooper Joe Paul. You'll remember his testimony. I think I'm being kind when I say that Trooper Paul's analysis lacked credibility.
I would agree that you are being kind, sir. I would say that, like, Trooper Paul maybe owes you a card and some flowers and, like, a gift basket and, lacked credibility is one way to put it. I would have said I've seen higher quality things drop out of a cow. So,
Trooper Paul lacks the experience, the education, the training, the background, and the knowledge to not only render opinions on these issues, but to even understand the issues themselves. He makes
oh man.
Makes the absurd claim that John was hit on the elbow area of his arm by a taillight. He was spun to the left in a pirouette. His arm stayed on the light long enough for the shards of plastic to explode around him, scratching his arm, even though he was wearing long sleeves, then projecting him 30 feet to the left, but not before making a stop to hit his head on either the curb or the pavement before coming to his final resting place with his unbroken phone tucked neatly under his body. It's nonsensical. It borders on laughable. Compare that testimony to Dr.
Damn. Somebody should, like, check on Trooper Paul, because I feel like he might need an ambulance after those burns. Like, is Trooper Paul okay today? Like, yeah.
Dan Wolf and Dr. Andrew Rentschler, both PhDs in engineering, both top of their field in accident reconstruction, both published peer-reviewed articles on the issues. Both men are highly sought after by the likes of national sports leagues and the United States Department of Defense.
Hey, Trooper Paul has also written a lot of papers, but he butt wrote them in the bathroom.
And these men are unrivaled in accident reconstruction. What did Dr. Rentschler say before he left the stand? This was even under cross-examination. He said that the physics and the science don't lie. His words were, you can't deny the science and the physics.
Mm-hmm.
John wasn't hit by that car, period. The Commonwealth cannot explain John O'Keefe's injuries. They can't explain his head wound. How did he get the head wound if he landed on snow-covered grass and dirt? And by the way, before Mr. Lally gets up and says it, because I know he's going to, there is zero evidence before you, zero, that cold grass and dirt turns into ice or turns into concrete. Zero. They can't explain the injury above his right eye, that laceration. They can't explain his nose. They haven't even tried to. They can't explain the injury to his tongue, the laceration on his tongue.
My
They
bet is
cannot
tomorrow.
explain the injuries to his back, to the back of his hands, the bruises, and certainly
Now, the thing is being unable to explain the injury to his tongue is a major fuck up from Lally. Lally could have explained the injury to his tongue easily, because pretty much anything that hits your head can cause a tongue injury. Why? Because your tongue lives in a hole that is full of teeth. And so something that smacks your head against something can cause your tongue to get, to have an interaction with those teeth. So
they cannot explain the injuries to his right arm, but maybe most importantly, they cannot and haven't even tried to explain the lack of injuries on John's body from the neck down. Nothing. He was pristine. Not a bump, not a bruise, not a fracture, not a broken bone. Nothing to suggest that he was hit by a 7,000-pound SUV going 25 miles per hour. And what of that right arm? According to the Commonwealth's best and brightest, Trooper Paul, John absorbed the entirety of the collision, a whole collision, with that 3.5-ton SUV entirely with his right arm, launching him some 30 feet.
I mean, you know how ridiculous that is. But I feel like, you know, this is just so dumb. It's obvious that he should have had bruising. He should have had something.
But amazingly, the arm suffered no break, no fracture, and didn't even get a bruise. So how are those injuries properly explained? The evidence is simple. John got into an altercation. He was punched. He tried to defend himself by putting his hands up. He may have even scratched his own nose by putting his hands in front of his face to defend himself. His hands were bruised and covering up.
5 minutes, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Honor. As he
So the 5-minute warning is always super helpful because you don't want to get to the, you know, it lets you know to wrap up.
continued, he got hit, punch went through, and he fell to the ground, fracturing his skull. At some point during that altercation, the dog got a hold of him, and the dog was pulled away. Every single injury is answered. Every single injury is explained by that. Ladies and gentlemen, given what we know about the facts and the physical evidence in this case, the actual truth in this case, how did this happen? How did we end up here? We ended up here because of relationships, insider trading, playing the who you know game, and building a tall blue wall, which takes decades and generations. But the real question is it going to continue? Will this festering malignancy that allows a lead detective and his supervisor to gloat and sneer while looking over naked pictures or looking for naked pictures of the woman that they've targeted, will that continue? And the answer should be, not if you have anything to say about it.
Okay, that argument right there was flirting with getting in trouble. Flirting with it, but he's not going to. I wouldn't have objected if I was the prosecution, but I would have started sitting up. And the reason why is because it starts sounding like a jury nullification argument, right? You should acquit Karen Read because Trooper Proctor is a jackass. And that would be the improper argument. But he doesn't actually make it. I wouldn't have objected if I'm Lally, but I'm sitting there waiting, going, take one more step towards that, and I will jump on you. And, he doesn't, so it's fine.
Michael Proctor is the lead investigator in this case, and much as the Commonwealth might try, they cannot distance themselves from the stench of him on this case and this investigation. Those secret group chats illustrate the quality and character of his investigation. Remind yourself how, quote, unbiased and an objective.
All right, I got to wiggle them. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Hopefully that fixed it.
Investigator, someone who's supposed to be looking for facts. Ask yourself, how did he approach his job? Late at night, sitting there in his office, deviously looking for naked pictures of Karen Read and talking about her like she's a piece of meat. Talking about her
Deviously.
bodily functions, her medical conditions, calling her vile names. I don't even have it in me to repeat what he said about her. He reduced her to an object, and he went.
I don't even have it in me to repeat what he said about her. you did a whole bunch when it was cross-examination, sir. But now he gets to say, oh, it's yeah. So now he sort of gets to play it both ways. So
further by insulting her. He went further than insulting her, and he dehumanized her. And when he was done betraying that very humanity, he wished for her to commit suicide. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you frame someone. That's how you dehumanize someone.
I've actually gotten yellow flag demonetization on like the last several videos because of BS. So, yeah.
So viciously that you can just pin it on the girl and cover for the homeowner because he's a Boston cop. That's how you rip a person's life apart and sleep like a baby while doing it. And then further that by saying, I hope she kills herself.
Now, I'm just going to say, during Rittenhouse's defense team dropped the hard R N-word during their open, which was a choice. So, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just began the discussion this afternoon or this morning with a quote about the truth, and I did that because that's what this case is about. Top to bottom, tip to tail, it's about the truth. Not hiding it or concealing it, but exposing the truth. The truth is immutable. It's not a feeling, it's not a whim. It's unflinching, it's unchanging, and it's everlasting. That's why the law is steady. That's why it's not captive to the whims of people drunk with power who think they're above the law, who think they're above scrutiny. That's why you stand as the guardian of justice and the protector of justice. The law demands the very integrity that Trooper Proctor and his investigation lacks, and it requires that you cannot convict Karen Read unless the Commonwealth has met its incredibly high burden to prove every element beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. And a moral certainty is defined as the highest degree of certainty possible in matters related to human affairs. It's the highest degree possible in your life. That's the level of certainty. And I'll leave you with this. You have the most powerful tool known to American jurisprudence because you have your vote. No one can take that away from you. Not me, not the Commonwealth, not the court. You may not have asked to be here, but each of you have given something very special of yourselves. You've agreed to do that, which is the highest calling a citizen can answer.
Just about every close includes this. This is the moment when you kind of fluff up the jury. But he's doing it well. I like his style of this because he's reminding them of reasonable doubt. He does get there in the end. And he's also saying, like, you have the responsibility. This is important. So
anyway, you've agreed to give your community your best. And my question to you is, what will you do with this moment? Ignore the lies and the manipulations, the misogyny, the bias, the lack of evidence. Could you ever do that? Would you ever do that? Or
could you ever do that? Would you ever do that? Like, oh, damn, son.
You say with your verdict, I see the truth, and I will not ever look the other way. When you stare the truth down, you'll see that the Commonwealth has not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt into a moral certainty, not even close. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen Read is innocent. Do justice and find her not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jackson.
All right. So the thing I'm going to point out is that there's a whole bunch of people pointing out that it sounds like Dr. Seuss, it sounds like Eminem, or it sounds like Mr. Rogers. And the thing is that's not actually an insult because all of those people have that lyrical tone. Like, Eminem isn't poor. And the reason why he's got all this money is because he's able to deliver really well. He's able to deliver like a a solid cadence and so forth. So, yeah. Now, I'm going to be right back, and then I will read super chats, and then we'll go to Lally. I should have done something before I started streaming, but I will be right back, and then, we will resume. So, okay, sorry about that. Sorry about that. All right, so let's cover some super chats quickly, and then we'll talk about Lally. And I already see people are fleeing the stream, possibly because of the short break, and partially because of because they know Lally is coming. So let's go through this. Julie, get well soon, Mrs. Runkle. Thanks for the recap. Thank you. Thanks for the recaps. Also love you and Law and Lumber and FNF. Thank you so much. Chelsea, thank you for 5 gifted memberships. Callista, thank you for 5 gifted memberships. Lucy P, thank you for the gifted membership. Ash Elizabeth XOX, thank you for the gifted membership. Improv Man, he was just quoting one of the founding fathers' view of juries. Yep, that he did a few quotes there, and I don't know where all of them are from. Nikki Lewis, love your recaps. Awesome insight. Thanks. Thank you. Ella, thank you for 20 gifted memberships. Wow. And Rainman YIC, thank you for 10 gifted memberships. Jacqueline Weaver, thank you for joining up. Good to have you. Joe Mendoza, yesterday, if the defense didn't pay ARCA experts to testify, who did? The FBI. Were they subpoenaed? Did they volunteer to testify for free, or did the FBI pay? I think they were subpoenaed, but the FBI would have paid them. I don't know. Like, nobody paid them to appear. So Ash Elizabeth XOX, I was watching Brian Albert the entire time Jackson was talking about him. I was a little surprised, also not really, that the whole clan was there. I think they were there to send a message. So Merle Lewis, regarding the tyranny remarks, Massachusetts is the cradle of revolution. Fair. A lot of people online have been theorizing that, like, John O'Keefe is has turned on the Commonwealth. I don't think he has. And I don't think his family has, because you see that they've got everyone there, right? That wouldn't be the case if they were turning on them. So Billy's Momzilla, music is helpful to create a pace for voiceovers, speeches, etc. Yeah, but you can't play music in court usually. Elizabeth Devine Esquire, is it just me, or does Alan Jackson look exactly like the police officer character named Randy on the TV show Monk? I don't know exactly, because I haven't actually seen Monk. So Joe Mendoza says, I think Jackson did a fantastic job. If you had to replace 2 key points on Jackson's closing, since it all needs to be contained in an hour, what would those be? I would drop the grab-assing. I don't think that landed. I'd have to think about another one. So Megan, also known as Megan is autistic, needed to say, I was like number 1,000. Thank you so much. Carson Pratt, grateful for your coverage, but glad you'll have a bit more time to yourself soon for a little bit, and then Baldwin starts. As per the micro fridge, you can always pre-chill in the regular fridge. Fair. Kelly's Corner, if I need a lawyer, I'm calling Jackson. If I could afford Jackson. Hope, greetings from Michigan, USA. Science doesn't lie, people do. Love your commentary, Runkle. Thank you. Cindy Wilkins, thanks, Ian. Enjoy your podcast. Thank you so much. Joy W101, does he risk losing a juror if they don't totally agree with Jackson's theory of what happened in the house? Maybe. It is possible. Ash Elizabeth XOX, butt dials galore, talented butts. I feel like they have a spot on OnlyFans if they want to for for the talented buttholes. So yeah. Joe Mendoza, I wish Jackson cornered Lally, telling the jury that Lally said in opening that Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe at 12:45, but Karen Reed is already home at 12:36. And for jury to look at Lally to backtrack that timeline, which Lally did. I'd agree. That is that would be a good thing there. Give a shout out to Brandy Churchill for hitting 25K today. She hit 20K the day of opening arguments and 25K on closing arguments. Fantastic. I got to meet her at CrimeCon, and she's a lovely person. Lovely person. So Haley Mouse, the butt dials were made by the Canton Buttworms. Billy's Momzilla, I thought it odd she dropped him off, not at the driveway, but in line with the backyard gate. I don't know why. Bridget M, thank you for the YouTube membership. It might have been because there's another vehicle there. I don't know. Bobcat Red, somebody buy a couple Lexuses. We need some tests to identify Lexus bites consistently. If I had money for spare Lexuses, I totally would, but I just don't. Baby Gator, Lolly much better today than opening. Even made some good points. I thought he was way better today than his opening. Way better, like no question. But still not enough to overcome reasonable doubt, in my opinion. No question that his closing, way better than his opening. Fancy RPG, if you want to see antique cars, go to Three Valley Gap in BC. My grandpa Rob has been restoring cars as old as 1890, and several are on display there. I would love to get into like old classic cars. I do not have the money or the time. So, yeah. Morgan was driving until now. Much love to Mrs. Runkle. I will pass that along. What don't we know? Rick Green was lying, though, that no one caught. He didn't test the same browser version. He looked at a couple other records from the device, included they were correct when ordered by time. If he was, I don't think they caught him on it. So just Sarah for Mrs. Runkle's Soup Fund. Hope she feels better. I will, after this, I will check and make sure. I'm sure she's going to be asleep. But Iris loves tequila. Talented cat and butthole. Dead. Billy's Momzilla says tests, etc. must be recreated using the same tech and versions, not similar. Sometimes a different version can function very differently. BL, did my butt send this chat? No, no brainworms here. Lakes 479, Jackson's use of language is really effective. He's got a poetry to him, and that was powerful. Froggy Girl, I will forever refer to Solo Cups as temporary evidence container. Jackson did such a fantastic closing. He kept me interested. I thought he did a really good job. Yannetti did a good job on the opening. He did a good job on the closing. Wendy Wilkinson, my uncle 20 years later, still can't forgive himself for the angry phone call to his son prior to a car accident where my cousin lost his life. It's tough. And I'm going to say I got regrets like that myself. Things I wish I did better. If I figure out the cure for that, I'll let you know. So, yeah. Fifi is my name. Love your kindness and good nature, Ian. Question regarding the dispute when search was made. In other cases, they pinpoint search time with no dispute. Why not here? Because here it was a live issue. Usually it's not an issue that's in dispute, but sometimes it is, right? Mispronounced name, hide the whiskey. That's how the worms get you. Fair. Scorpion, maybe Jackson should offer Proctor a gift. Rob Smith, what if any evidence is Lolly going to bring today for a change, or will he work for the defense again? I mean, he can't call new evidence, but he can argue it. Carrie Wellborn says, must be terrifying living in that community, thinking your son or daughter, brother, sister, mom, or dad could be prosecuted by Trooper Proctor if they were innocent, right? If I was in that community, I'd be moving. But yeah. Rebu, thank you for the YouTube membership. Much appreciated. Skeesy, it's like something straight out of Phoenix Wright. It kinda. Ronnie Sherrard, Lolly's closing was nothing more than an attempt to rebut the defense's case rather than prove his own. Yeah, he makes a few substantial mistakes. And if you're on the rear foot like that as the prosecution, you're in a bad spot. Roketsu 86, Jackson referring to this investigation as a festering malignancy was so powerful. Yep. I mean, that's a word, right? Or that's a phrase. Brenda Cucaro, thank you for the YouTube membership. Ashley Sheely, thank you so much for the YouTube membership. Morgan, Jackson reading them all for filth is giving me life. Nice. John Duncan, when I saw Ian's cover guitar tutorial video, that Dead Kennedy song, when it was inverted, I learned it and it sounded like the Carpenters. Okay, I might be a little lost there, but thank you. Ellie Parker 3, could the jury ask for timestamps that Jackson is mentioning? They could possibly ask the judge for them, but I don't think she'd give them. So, Rob Smith, why, if any, is the FBI involved here? The FBI is involved here because this is shady AF. Cat in Virginia lacked credibility and stuff. Clueless Closey, a bit of shade. This was a total solar eclipse. Kinda. Ashley Sheely, thank you for the gifted membership. Much appreciated. Baby Gator, Bus Stop Rando and stuff. If you look up pigeon business in the dictionary, there's a picture of Trooper Paul. I think he's not pigeon business so much as he's a pigeon's business, if you get it. John Duncan, thank you for the 10 gifted memberships. Much appreciated. Jeff Carey, the 5-minute warning is for you too. 5 minutes until Lolly drives viewers away with his Snorefest. Fair. Ashley Sheely, thank you for the gifted membership. Much appreciated. Menachem David, Runkle, sorry your date night was postponed. Thanks for being a part of my date night with Ann Bell. Thank you so much. And we'll make it up. So John Duncan, when a defense attorney believes in his client, it sounds like this. He's doing a great job. Jenny Russell, thank you so much for the super sticker there. Kaylee Lien, hearsay, I saw someone on X say that Lolly had around 5 pages left of closing. How the hell did he think he would get through that much? I don't think he practiced his timing. You saw good timing from Jackson. Lolly runs out of time at the end and fumbles. Baby Gator, motion to watch Lolly at 2 times. We're not going to watch him at 2 times. We can take him up to 1.25. Krista Bolster Robichaud, thank you for the 5 gifted memberships. Gethralkin, you absolutely need to see Monk. Okay, I will look it up. Kayla, reminder, you rock. Thank you for being you. Thank you so much. We're going to take it up to 1.25 for Lolly. Elijah, thanks for the great coverage, Ian. I've noticed that John O'Keefe's mother is shaking her head a lot. She did that again as Jackson said Karen Reed is innocent. Is this improper? If she does it enough, the judge might call it out. But, I mean, she's not... They're going to be reluctant to go after, like, the mom of the deceased. So, and everyone being in court feels intimidation-y. They're allowed to be there, but it does have a vibe to it. I'm shocked. We're close to never seeing the fan again. We're going to miss the fan. Callista for the spare Lexus's fund. Thank you. Icosaplex, did the defense ever touch on the prelude audio to the supposed confession? Not in their closing, no. Noel D. Nidun, I hated Lolly saying no one else said that John's arm was outstretched. Was he there the day of Trooper Paul's cross? He kind of fudges some things. Ambling Soul, if you had to compare the two, which was worse? Defense for Hannah Gutierrez skipping over their firearms expert during closing, or the Commonwealth skipping over their accident reconstruction expert? Both were bad. Both were real bad. Christine Foster, make a note to look at the timeline. 1240 JM text JO. Calls calling but gets no answers. She said they were butt dials and didn't make the calls. Yeah. Their timeline I'm going to have some thoughts on. Brenda Cuccaro, as a woman, I would want to discuss the shady stuff. Can't take off for 9 weeks. Need to discuss these debacles. Yep. Christine Foster, thank you for the new membership. It was really nice to watch an extraordinary lawyer. It's a pleasure to watch Jackson and Unetti in action. JBB, the FBI agents monitoring all these butt-dialing phones said, wait just a damn minute in order to get involved. Josh, with the FBI investigating, would it help the investigators if Karen was acquitted? I don't think it's gonna matter to them one way or the other. Doubt Lally would intentionally throw the case, but motive? I don't think he threw the case. Andrew, the way Lally just repeats his version of the narrative and ignores reality when it doesn't match feels like gaslighting. Scary thing is it can work. It might. I mean, conviction is still on the table, right? So, all right, let's talk about mistake number 1 that Lally made. Mistake number 1. If I was Lally, I would have asked for a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break. I would have just said, Judge, could we have 15 minutes of break? I've got to, I got to hit the, I got to hit the John. And, oh, wait, a screen share. Oh, shit, did I just say that? I got to hit the men's room. Okay, I'm not going to live that down. Okay. So the reason why you ask for a break is that you want the jury to have a chance to, to stretch their legs, to, because it's a lot of sitting and hearing a dude talk, right? You want to let them breathe between it, right? Because it's 2 hours of just seeing them talk. So give him that break. The second thing he really, so don't just start right in. The next thing you need to do is you need to, you got to plan your timing. You got to have you got to have that figured out. So, you don't want to be running out of time. I will just say, when I'm doing these kinds, if I'm doing a closing and I've got an hour or I've got 30 minutes or whatever, I just recently was arguing something in the Court of Appeal, and you get 10 minutes, right? So, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, so I put up a timer so I can see where I'm at, right? So that when I know I'm at 2 minutes, it's like, start wrapping it up. Lally doesn't do that. I literally will put a timer by the, right so I could see it. I did that at the Supreme Court. I did that at the Court of Appeal. I do that in provincial court. I do that in every court. And if I had, if I was doing a stream and I literally was like, I have an hour, I would make sure to do it. And you prep it, right? You do the talk. I did a talk for a firearms organization, and they're like, we want you to talk for 30 minutes. So I did my talk, and and then made sure it was 30 minutes, right? If I can't do it 30 minutes at home, then I can't do it in 30 minutes in front of an audience, right? So, all right, let's roll here.
I hit him.
You know what? I'm going to give him this. It's a good start. It's probably how I'd have started. Even though if I'm on the jury, I don't believe I hit him, right? I don't believe that if I'm on the jury personally. But if the jury does believe that, and this is, I think, his best argument. This is the argument that when you see people on Twitter, when you see them saying, "I'm sure that Karen Read is guilty," they come back to the "I hit him." So, and yet he did it one too many times, but it's a good start, right? He adds an extra one.
I hit him. I hit him. I hit him. I hit him. Those are the words of the defendant. 4 times. You heard testimony from 4 different
3
witnesses
times.
who overheard and observed those statements from the defendant on January 29th, 2022. You heard testimony from firefighter Timothy Nuttall. He was trying to bag Val Mask, Mr. O'Keefe. He was working on resuscitative efforts to try to save Mr. O'Keefe's life. He asked if anyone saw anything or knew what happened, and the defendant said, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." Firefighter Anthony Flamati was asking if anyone had information on why Mr. O'Keefe was there in the snow. The defendant repeatedly said, "I hit him, I hit him, oh my God, I hit him."
Now, I thought that this was very well dealt with on cross. So I don't believe that's what she said, or at least not as "I hit him." So what I believe from this is that it was, that it was just that she was like, "Did I hit him?" as more of a questioning thing. That I believe. But yeah.
Firefighter Katie McLaughlin was tasked by firefighter Flamati with asking for biographical information and for what the cause was of the traumatic injuries that all the firefighters testified that they observed on Mr. O'Keefe. She asked the defendant, and the defendant said, "I hit him," repeatedly. Firefighter McLaughlin asked for clarification. "You did what?" And the defendant repeated, "I hit him." Jennifer McCabe stated initially
this is fairly strong
over the phone when speaking with the defendant that the defendant said, "Could I have hit him in the car while they're on the phone with Ms. Roberts going from Ms. McCabe's house to Mr. O'Keefe's house? Did I hit him? Could I have hit him?" Once on scene, once asked, as Ms. McCabe described by an EMT, for name, age, things like that related to Mr. O'Keefe, what caused the trauma? She indicated in her testimony that the defendant said repeatedly, "I hit him."
So he's basically going, "We have a confession. Why are we here?" Right? It's a good start. It's a good start. I actually might have saved this for the end rather than the beginning. But
You heard testimony from Officer Sarif, statements that he attributed to the defendant as saying that morning, "This is all my fault. This is all my fault. I did this." This is what the defendant is saying on scene. Since then, stories changed a little bit. But those were the words that came from the defendant's mouth on January 29th, 2022, as John O'Keefe lay dying on the front lawn of 34 Fairview Road, where the defendant had left him after striking him with her motor vehicle several hours before, and then left him freezing there in a blizzard. There's certain things that have come up over the course of this trial as far as evidence and testimony are concerned, little things. And what I would suggest to you, it's those little things that are quite telling as it pertains to the defendant's statements and the defendant's actions over the course of January 28th into January 29th.
when he says little things, some of the little things are going to get to like super like subatomic particle little things. We're going to talk about some of the subatomic particles he tries to use.
And beyond. And I'm going to bring some of those to your attention as I go through, but just ask you to keep that in mind as far as when you're deliberating, when you're reviewing this testimony and this evidence. The little things matter. The little things start piling up in this case. Throughout the course of this trial, you've heard a lot of purported evidence or questions of witnesses in an attempt to distract you from the evidence in this case. It's essentially defense by obfuscation. It's a three-card monitor.
Defense by obfuscation, he says. Sir, you've been going with prosecution by obfuscation. I'm also just going to note, I don't like his tie. His tie seems really ugly, but that's beside the point.
Facts on the evidence in this case are your card. They're the Queen of Hearts. And so what I want you to, or what the defense wants you to do is not look at that card. Look at anything else.
Did you catch the Freudian slip there? You catch the fun little Freudian slip? Taking it down to one speed.
essentially defense by obfuscation. It's a three-card monte trick. The facts and the evidence in this case are your card. They're the Queen of Hearts. And so what I want you to, or what the defense wants you to do.
So what I want you, what the defense wants you to, that feels like a Freudian slip. That is an interesting little oops.
Is not look at that card. Look at anything else. Look at movement. Look at this person. Look at that person. Look at text messages. Look at this. Don't pay attention to the facts and the evidence, because if you do, what it will ineluctably lead you to is that the defendant is guilty of each of the three indictments before this court. The evidence and the facts of this case are for you, the jury, to decide. Using your common sense, using your life experiences as your guide through that as you go. Before I turn to that evidence that I will submit to you ineluctably demonstrates the defendant's guilt.
He's just used the word ineluctably twice. He likes that word. It's a $10 word, so.
Let me first just address Trooper Proctor. The text messages from Trooper Proctor are unprofessional, they're indefensible, they're inexcusable.
Unprofessional, indefensible, inexcusable is how he tries to sort of sweep for Trooper Proctor. Okay.
However, as distasteful as those messages are, and their content is, I submit they had no bearing whatsoever or impact whatsoever on the integrity of the entirety of the investigation that Massachusetts State Police collectively conducted into John O'Keefe's death here.
Yeah, you're saying it has no impact, but saying don't make it so. I'm just like, okay. Okay. I've taken him up to 1.5 speed because Lolly speaks so slowly. He's wondering how he's running out of time when he speaks so slowly.
As was asked of Trooper Proctor on cross-examination, these were texts from his personal phone that he never thought would see the light of day. He was asked whether or not he ever thought that he would be asked about these in a courtroom. Put to him in sort of a safe space, a safe place for him to discuss, if you will.
Just because he thought he would get away with it. Like, holy shit, dude. Did you just say he thought no one would ever know? Like, you know, I feel like this is the Simpsons line about, like, you know, shoplifting's a victimless crime, like punching someone in the dark, right? Yeah. So, Lolly, do freaking better.
What do you not see in those text messages? You don't see any discussion.
I didn't see any integrity. You said that there's integrity. I didn't see any of that.
Discuss, if you will. What do you not see in those text messages?
Integrity.
You don't see any discussion or any illusion of any conspiracy, of any framing of the defendant, of any planting of any evidence. No evidence whatsoever.
Except that the defense was using his text messages a lot. So, yeah.
Why? Because it didn't happen. There is no conspiracy. There is no cover-up. There is no evidence of any of that beyond speculation, rampant speculation and conjecture on behalf of the defense. Two things can be true at the same time. They're mutually exclusive. The texts from Trooper Proctor are distasteful, they're disrespectful, they're unprofessional.
Did you fire him? Was he fired?
There's no defense to them. And the defendant killed John O'Keefe. Turning to the evidence, let me first talk a little bit about John O'Keefe. You heard a lot about him over the course of this trial, about his selfless story, through his family and friends that loved him, including his adopted niece and nephew. You heard a lot about the lives he touched and the different people who he had friendships with. You heard a lot about from those particular friends and from his family. Turning to what I would submit to you as a timeline.
Okay, so he's going to give us a timeline. He's going to put this up on the big screen. We're going to get his timeline. And there's going to be something missing on this one.
This may be a little hard to see up here. What I'm going to go is from left to right. January 28, 2022, 9:49 in the morning, Karen and John begin fighting over text messages. 2:25 p.m. in the afternoon, the defendant texts Mr. O'Keefe, "Tell me if you are interested in someone else. Can't think of any other reason you've been like this. John texts back, nope.
They have a
2:25,
stupid
Mr. O'Keefe
fight.
texts the defendant, things haven't been great between us for a while. Ever consider that? This is also testimony that you heard through multiple sources, whether it be phones, whether it be from the children, whether it be from other friends or family members as to the relationship in the months and weeks leading up to John's murder. 2:32 p.m. John texts the defendant, sick of always arguing and fighting. It's been weekly for several months now. He then texts the defendant, OMG, stop calling. This is during the time frame that Trooper Garino was talking about, with 18 phone calls, most of which were rejected, some of which were missed, and a couple of which were answered over the course of this afternoon, as she's continuing to needle and try to engage him in a fight that he doesn't want to have. 2:33 p.m. The defendant texts John, so you're not into this anymore. 2:34 p.m. John texts the defendant, I am not answering, stop calling. The defendant then texts John, then stop starting with him. 2:38 p.m. The defendant texts John, I'm going to grab a drink in a bit. 2:38 in the afternoon. Around 3 p.m. is a testimony you heard from Erin O'Keefe in regard to the defendant texting her, asking if she can go out without her husband, Paul, asking to go out for a drink. This is while Erin O'Keefe testified she was waiting for one of her children at the bus stop, picking that child up around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This is also the point in which the defendant says to Ms. O'Keefe, wish I didn't speak to another O'Keefe after 2004. 7:30 p.m.
By the way, as fights go, this is pretty weak tea. I have seen way worse shit in texts. Anyone remember the Depp trial? Anyone remember the stuff like Depp said in, after they broke up? Yeah. That was way worse, right? And even that is just the kind of shit people say about their exes. Female friend of mine, she broke up with her boyfriend because her boyfriend had a lot of other friends she didn't really know about. So she had some thoughts about him. Like, she had thoughts like, hey, I hope he has an accident with a wood chipper kind of thoughts, right? She did not kill him. So, yeah.
You have Mr. O'Keefe and Mr. Camerano arriving at C.F. McCarthy's, with the defendant arriving at 8:51. 8:58 p.m. is when the defendant receives drink number 1 at C.F. McCarthy's. Vodka soda, tall cylinder glass, lime, and a straw. 9:13 p.m., drink number 2. 9:20 p.m., drink number 3. 9:33 p.m., drink number 4. 9:57 p.m., drink number 5. 10.
And they can't actually prove that these are all alcohol. They've got and the thing is that because the judge didn't let the defense split their time, he gets to say all of this without any response, which hurts the defense substantially.
22 p.m., drink number 6. 10:29 p.m., drink number 7. 7 drinks from 8:51.
But you see, they both emphasize number of drinks at a given point.
8:58 p.m. through 10:29 p.m. when she receives that last drink at C.F. McCarthy's. Drink that she indicates to Sergeant Mechanic and several others on the next day that she did not take with her from C.F. McCarthy's to the waterfall, which several individuals at the waterfall testified that she produced from her coat when she walked in, and that you can clearly see on the C.F. McCarthy's video her walking out the door with the same tall cylinder glass in her right hand. Now, understanding that some of these drinks are not the full tall cylinder drinks, what she's doing is she's getting shot glasses of vodka and then pouring them into the drink after she's consumed the drink. 10:54 p.m. The defendant and Mr. O'Keefe arrive at the waterfall, during the course of which, about an hour that they're there, the defendant receives drinks number 8 and drinks number 9. 12:10 a.m. from the waterfall video, you have Ms. McCabe, Ms. Kolokithis, and the defendant departing the waterfall together. Interestingly, around the same time, you also have the text and screenshot communications between Colin Albert and Allison McCabe in reference to him getting picked up at that time. You also have testimony from Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Caitlin Albert, Brian Albert Jr. in reference to them sort of walking in from the waterfall as Colin Albert is walking out of 34 Fairview Road, gets picked up by Ms. McCabe, and then is driven home. 1 minute later.
That's assuming you believe any of those people. That's the problem that he's got. I mean, this would be a good close if he had better evidence, right? This would be a good close if his people were more not bullshit.
Later, 12:11, Mr. O'Keefe is then on the waterfall video walking out with cocktail glass in his right hand. At 12:14 a.m., Mr. O'Keefe texts Ms. McCabe, where to? 12:14 a.m., based on the fact that she's driving, and Matt McCabe indicated in his testimony that she should call him instead of texting while driving, Ms. McCabe calls John O'Keefe, speaks with him regarding directions or going over which way to come in Chapman Street over Cedar Crest as far as coming into Fairview Road.
Okay.
12:15:38 a.m., the defendant's vehicle drives by the Canton Library. You can see that on the video. 12:17:56, the defendant drives by the Temple Beth Abraham video. Again, you can see that on the video. Remember also the testimony from Lieutenant Tully in regard to the CSLI data and the ranging data in reference to coinciding with what you observed the black SUV from each of those respective videos.
Oh, absolutely. It's possible.
12:19:32, Mr. O'Keefe enters 34 Fairview Road into his Waze app on his phone. 12:23 a.m. is when the defendant conducts a 3-point turn on Cedar Crest and travels back toward Fairview. That's from Mr. O'Keefe's GPS native location data from his phone.
So what doesn't he have on his chart? He doesn't, like, he's got his timeline charts, but I don't see a timeline chart with the actual death on that.
Around the same time, at 12:23 and 12:24 is when you have that testimony from Ryan Nagel, Heather Maxson, and Ricky D'Antonio pulling into Fairview Road around the same time and pulling in behind the dark SUV. 12:25 a.m. is the last native location GPS data of John O'Keefe's phone. It's in that area between 32 and 34 Fairview Road, where his body is discovered the next morning, in which there is no movement of that phone from that 12:25 a.m. period until Miss Roberts then picks up the phone on the grass underneath Mr. O'Keefe's body sometime after 6 a.m.
I mean, your timeline demonstrative should really have the murder on it, right? If you're thinking it's a murder, you should put the murder on your, on your demonstrative.
What you have up on the screen right now is that data, those plotting points that Trooper Garino was testifying about as far as the movement of the vehicle. The movement of the vehicle as it comes down Cedar Crest, passes by Fairview, reverses direction, and then comes down Fairview, moving up, as witnesses described, eventually stopping in that area of the property line between 32 and 34 Fairview Road, which happens to coincide with the vehicle control history database information from the Toyota tech stream, which you now have up on the screen for you here, indicating that following that 3-point turn, approximately 8 minutes after that, from Trooper Paul's testimony, as far as the mileage, 36 to 38 miles, matching up with the time that the vehicle is in front of 34 Fairview Road, that the vehicle travels in reverse, in a straight line, for 24.2 miles per hour for 62.5 feet, with a minor steering angle change, which the trooper indicated was consistent with a pedestrian collision. At 12.
Okay, which Trooper Paul indicated was consistent with a collision. I'm just going to say nobody. I didn't even see the super big Karen Reed is guilty crowd saying that Trooper Paul was credible, right? I didn't see anybody saying that.
30 a.m., you have that second triggering event 8 minutes after the 3-point turn when the vehicle's in reverse at 24.2 miles an hour. 12:35 is when
So second trigger event, I don't see the murder up on this thing. And the reason why is because from his initial timeline, the murder should be here. And now he's moving it way back because, So his timeline gets edited.
defendant calls John, and that's unanswered. 12:36 is around the time that the defendant's phone connects to the Wi-Fi at One Meadows Avenue, Mr. O'Keefe's home. 12:37 is when the defendant leaves this voicemail. So within minutes of that vehicle.
Oh no, she says she hates him. After you think, why would she call after she supposedly killed him to say she hates him? That makes no sense, right? It makes no sense.
Data going 24.2 miles an hour in reverse for 62.5 feet. The defendant leaves that voicemail, seething in rage as she's screaming, "John, I fucking hate you."
Why would you do that after you killed somebody? It doesn't make sense to me.
12:40 to 12:42. Ms. McCabe is texting Mr. O'Keefe. She tries calling Mr. O'Keefe, gets no answer. You recall from her testimony around this time frame, about 12:40, she was unsure whether the vehicle was actually still out front or if it had gone at that point. But she was looking for John because she had seen the defendant's vehicle in front of the house and no one had come in. So she was wondering where her friend, Mr. O'Keefe, was. 12:55. The defendant texts John, "See you later." 12:59. The defendant calls, leaves another voicemail for Mr. O'Keefe. Exhibit 637. The sound of weapons.
"John, I'm the only fucking kid. Nobody knows what the fuck you are, you fucking pervert."
Why would she be saying nobody knows where the fuck you are, you fucking pervert, if she hit him and left him for dead in the snow? Did you just say as she's reversing, she's sending voicemails as she runs him over? That makes no sense. Yeah.
But somebody did know where Mr. O'Keefe was, the defendant.
This is some quality shade. Gina L saying Lolly's never pissed off a woman before. Disappointed maybe, but never pissed one off. Maybe just one never cared about him enough to be pissed off.
Knew exactly where he was. She had driven him there. She had struck him there. She had left him to die. 1:02 a.m. The defendant.
Then why, like you're saying, she knew exactly where he was. It's like, then it's totally inconsistent with her leaving a voicemail saying she doesn't, right? And if she was trying to leave a voicemail to like fake up the case, you would think she would do it, you know, in a like, John, I'm worried about you kind of way. Not like, yeah.
Leaves another voicemail with no content. And then she texts John, your kids are fucking alone. 1:09 a.m.
Why would she say your kids are fucking alone if she's dead in the snow?
The defendant texts John, I'm back in Mansfield. The kids are home alone. She's not. GPS, as far as it never disconnects from the Wi-Fi until the following morning. There's no indication.
Yeah, because she actually does care enough about the kids to make sure that they're okay. But she's like, he's like, oh, she lied about being in Mansfield. It's like, dude.
That Ms. Reed left and went to her home in Mansfield at any point. 1:10 a.m., the defendant calls her parents. 1:11 a.m., she calls Mr. O'Keefe and leaves this voicemail.
John, I'm going home. I cannot make you sick of me. I need to go home. You are fucking using me right now. You're fucking another girl. She's sleeping next to me. You're a fucking loser. Fuck yourself.
It's pretty clear that she thinks he's like, you know, that he's kind of playing hide the mushroom with someone else, which is inconsistent with thinking that he's dead, right? Either you think he's dead or you think his dick's in another girl, but you probably don't think both, right?
19 a.m., the defendant leaves another voicemail. Now, about 1:43 or 1:45 a.m. is when Julie Nagel testified that they were leaving the house. And she sees a large black object on the lawn near the flagpole while leaving 34 Fairview Road. Doesn't think much of it at the time, isn't expecting Mr. O'Keefe or any body to be out on the front lawn. 4:42 a.m., the defendant calls and speaks. The calls to her parents are finally answered. 4:49 a.m., the defendant calls Ms. Camerano, screaming, "Where's Mike?" 4:53 in the morning is when the defendant instructs Kaylee, Mr. O'Keefe's niece, to call Ms. McCabe. Why? Because the defendant doesn't have Ms. McCabe's phone number. Indicates that John didn't come home. We got in a fight, and I left him at
How horrifying.
the waterfall. Those are the first statements or the first version of events that she's able to communicate out to the world as to what happened to Mr. O'Keefe, where he is. We got into a fight. I left him at the waterfall. 5 a.m., the defendant calls Kerry Roberts, saying, John's dead, Kerry, hangs up the phone. 5:01, the defendant calls Kerry Roberts again. And it's at this point that she indicates that John's dead, he must have been hit by a plow. 5:07 a.m., the defendant leaves One Meadows Ave. You have the video of that. It's number 153 in Exhibit 6. We'll get to that a little more in a moment. About 5:10 a.m., the defendant calls Kerry Roberts. Ms. Roberts starts calling hospitals, calling 911, something that you would do if you didn't know where Mr. O'Keefe was for all of these hours, that all of these other phone calls are being made and these text messages are being sent, and calling your parents, and all of these other things. No calls to 911 from the defendant. While John...
Oh, gee, she didn't call 911. People do stupid things, right? This is the thing, is if like a loved one of yours dies, every single decision you make will be judged, right? So like if Mrs. Runkle, if she, if somebody snuck into the house and murdered her while I was on this live stream, even though you guys can see me and see me like bringing up chats and so forth, so I'm obviously at the keys, they would use every single detail as, evidence of guilt, including they'd be like, and he was demonstrating pulling up chats so that he could, convince us later that I'm like, yeah, and they'd go, except for the pee break. all of my, or a lot of my hypotheticals involve murder. So
John O'Keefe is laying, freezing, and dying from a brain injury and skull fracture on the front lawn of 34 Fairview Road. 5:11 a.m., the defendant's vehicle is seen on the Canton Library camera heading towards the waterfront.
this is also an excellent point. I wouldn't call 911 if I thought my boyfriend was sleeping over with someone. Let's imagine how that call goes, right? Hello, 911, what's your emergency? Yeah, so my boyfriend is scratching another girl's itch. I'm not sure how that's an emergency. The itch is on her cervix. Still not an emergency. Goodbye. Click. Like, Katya, love you, Ian, but listening to Lolly is excruciating for the pro bono fund. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. All right. Yeah.
Be sort of retracing steps. 5:18 a.m. The defendant's vehicle was seen at Washington Street and Chapman on the Temple Beth Abraham video, heading in the same direction
It's a
that it was the
joke.
night before when it was heading to 34 Fairview Road. 5:35 is when the defendant arrives at Ms. McCabe's house. Ms. Roberts arrives shortly thereafter. Both of them see the broken taillight at that time in the driveway. Now, that gap of 5:18 to 5:35 is way too much time to be driving from the area of the waterfall to Jennifer McCabe's house.
I'm at one beer, Runkle. This is one beer, Runkle. I've had one can of Coke and one beer.
Both of them see the broken taillight at that time in the driveway. Now, that gap of 5:18 to 5:35 is way too much time to be driving from the area of the waterfall to Jennifer McCabe's house. And as I indicated,
5:18 to 5:35, except didn't your expert say that she connected to the Wi-Fi at 5:26? Yeah.
moment before, heading in the same direction, same directionality, retracing the steps from the night before, heading towards 34 Fairview Road. Why is it that the defendant can see Mr. O'Keefe when they eventually get to Fairview Road and no one else can? It's because she knew exactly where he was. She had hit him and left him there the night before, and she had gone back during that time frame between 5:18 a.m. when she's seen on the Temple video and 5:35 when she arrives at Ms. McCabe's house.
So he's saying she went back to see. Why, if she went back to see, would she bring people to the body? Right? This makes no sense.
5:33 is when the defendant, Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts, return to One Meadows Ave searching for John. 6:03 is when the defendant, no one else, spots Mr. O'Keefe's body buried in the snow. Exhibit 12, indicating this cruiser camera video, which I know you've seen a dozen times.
I suspect that's probably because she was the only person who actually gave a shit and who was actually worried. Everyone else was just kind of thinking she'd lost her mind. The other thing is, let's say these other people that she's with are aware of the, of the killing. Are they going to point out the body? Like, it makes no sense. She could have just not done this and just slept in and then been like, hey, where the fuck is John in the morning, right?
So where I'm starting it from this point in this card right here is the spotlight that Officer Sarif had to use in order to locate, even with the vehicle of Ms. Roberts parked right in the middle of the road.
Ow.
In the darkness, in the snow, in the blizzard, in those conditions, the defendant, sitting in the back seat of the vehicle, knows exactly where Mr. O'Keefe is, covered in snow, as you heard from all of the paramedics.
Yeah, the defendant who isn't driving and therefore can look out the side of the window and who is on the side where the body is seen. Okay. I mean, he's spinning. It's annoying me because I don't believe it, but he's doing a decent job of the spin. It's pissing me off.
From the civilian unit system, from the first responders. The defendant knows exactly where he is. 6:07 a.m., Ms. McCabe calls 911. 6:08, the defendant leaves that 4 or 5 minute voicemail, leaving the phone in the car for some reason to Mr. O'Keefe's phone. 6:23 and 6:24 in the morning is when Ms. McCabe conducts those Google searches. 7:50 in the morning is when Mr. O'Keefe is pronounced deceased at Good Samaritan Hospital. 4:13 to 4:20 p.m. is when the defendant's SUV is towed from her parents' house in Dighton. 5:20 p.m. is when the search team arrives in the area of 34 Fairview Road to conduct the search for evidence. 5:30 p.m. is when the defendant's vehicle arrives at the Canton Police Department south.
5:30 p.m. is when the police car arrives at the Sallyport. That's not what the evidence said, because the person admitted that was not correct. 5:30 p.m. You lying sack of shit. No.
We circle back for a moment to Mr. O'Keefe, to his family, to his friends, and to his relationship with the defendant. We heard testimony from Paul and Aaron O'Keefe that they liked the defendant, that they thought he was good for John, thought he was good for the kids. All outward appearances of the relationship were good. We heard testimony from the children that was not true behind closed doors. But Paul O'Keefe testified that he told the defendant's parents this, that he liked Ms. Reed, that he thought that she was good for John, thought that she was good for the kids, weeks before John's murder. He even blew her a kiss in the emergency department at Good Samaritan as he was walking out and she was still being treated while they were there. Invited her over to John's house to grieve with him. Invited her to sit down with him while he explained to their nephew Patrick about John's passing.
And then they took her phone and they ordered her not to have any contact with the family. This is gross because she was ordered not to have any contact.
Defendant shows up at the house. Abruptly goes upstairs with her father for a period of about 15 minutes, which is about half of the time that she spent there that morning grieving with the family. She left with a bag of her belongings, drove with her family there, and then took an extra vehicle in the height of the blizzard, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, drive that vehicle all the way from Canton, where it was parked at her boyfriend's house, where she stayed over on many occasions.
Gee, why might she not want to stay at her boyfriend's house after he died? Fuck off. Really? Really? You saw. Yeah, and the extra vehicle is her own freaking car. She's moving her car to where she's going to be staying. You sack of... Oh, this is...
Drove that vehicle, or felt the need to drive that vehicle from Canton all the way down to her parents' house in Dighton at the height of the blizzard.
Yeah, no kidding, because she's taking her car to where she's going to be.
You heard testimony from Aaron O'Keefe of the text messages and the phone call on January 28th. You heard that Aaron O'Keefe called the defendant on the morning of the 29th because she was concerned for her. She wanted to know what was going on with someone she considered her friend. The defendant yells, "John is dead." Ms. Robertson grabs the phone and then updates Aaron O'Keefe as to what's going on with John. Aaron O'Keefe again calls back later because she's concerned for someone that she considered her friend. How does the defendant respond? These are some of the little things. The defendant indicates to Ms. O'Keefe that she just has to remember the bad times and indicates to her, "I don't think I'll ever see you guys." This is after she's done her quick in and out at One Meadows Ave and is now with her parents or with her father, driving that car, essentially taking
Okay, what does that mean? Nothing.
the murder weapon from Canton and bringing it down to her parents' house in Dighton. She's indicating over the phone to Aaron O'Keefe, "I don't think..."
He's trying to suggest that she's trying to hide the vehicle because it's a murder weapon, in his words. If she was trying to hide the vehicle, wouldn't she have done something like take it to a car wash or take it to be crushed into a fucking cube or set it on fire in the woods or sunk it into the ocean or just park it in the middle of nowhere where no one can find it? But instead, it's like, oh, she secretly took the vehicle to where she was going to be. Like, oh, what a clever plan to hide things. Maybe she could have taken it to wherever they put Chloe. You know, if we're talking about consciousness of guilt and hiding the murder weapon, where the fuck is Chloe, Mr. Lally?
"I'll ever see you guys." Why? If she didn't kill John, why would she say that?
Because she's grieving, and grieving people say stupid things.
You heard a lot of testimony about New Year's Eve in Aruba. You You heard the testimony from Ms. O'Keefe in regard to them exchanging, her and the defendant exchanging text messages on the flight down, arranging times to meet up. And then the defendant telling Erin via text message that she caught Johnny kissing Laura's sister in the hotel lobby. She got into an argument about it, and then they never met up. Meaning the defendant, Ms. O'Keefe, got into an argument about it, and she and Erin O'Keefe never ended up meeting up in Aruba. You heard testimony consistent from Laura Sullivan, Marietta Sullivan.
The Aruba shit just, that didn't do anything for me. So,
As well as the children. The kiss never happened. It never would happen, based on the relationship, the godfather relationship that John O'Keefe had with Laura Sullivan, her family, and particularly Laura Sullivan's child. The defendant persists with this unfounded suspicion and accusations of infidelity in her text messages with Mr. O'Keefe, in her text messages with Mr. Higgins.
yeah, lots of people have had pets that have gone to the farm.
Where she's accusing Mr. O'Keefe of making out in the lobby with Marietta Sullivan. Both of the Sullivans and the children have the defendant and Mr. O'Keefe following this incident with Marietta Sullivan going into a room. Both of the children testified that they're in that room for about 20 to 25 minutes and they're arguing about the defendant, indicating that Mr. O'Keefe kissed someone in the lobby.
Oh no, they had a
about 20
fight.
to 25 minutes after her sister comes out and states her displeasure about the defendant. It's about 20 to 25 minutes before Mr. O'Keefe comes out, and then he and Ms. Sullivan have a conversation. Ms. Sullivan indicates that Mr. O'Keefe's phone is essentially blowing up, lighting up with calls and texts from the defendant. I would submit similar to the afternoon of January 28th. Mr. O'Keefe says she's crazy and he needs to take this and goes off from her. Ms. Sullivan has later conversations with Mr. O'Keefe on this Aruba trip, asks him if he's okay, asks him if he's happy. She indicated in her testimony that Mr. O'Keefe shrugs it off and says it is what it is. You heard testimony from the children about the arguments in the weeks and the months. I know this is a displeasure to the defense counsel that the children came in and actually testified as to what happened behind closed doors in the house.
I'm sorry, did you just say, I know this is a displeasure to defense counsel that the children actually testified? It's probably a displeasure to the jury that you made them testify. I don't think that plays well, that bit of smarm.
They both recall frequent fights. They both recall Mr. O'Keefe trying multiple times to break up with the defendant, asking her to leave the house, the defendant refusing to leave the house. His niece Kaylee, John tried to defuse and tried to walk away, and the defendant would follow each time during each argument. They both indicated that Mr. O'Keefe had told the defendant that the relationship had run its course, similar to language within the text messages you have between the defendant and Mr. O'Keefe. That Mr. O'Keefe was sick of arguing, again, mirroring those text messages from January 28th, leading up into going out to C.F. McCarthy's, eventually the waterfall, and the defendant killing Mr. O'Keefe in the early morning hours of January 29th. We have testimony in regard to the ring camera. Kaylee indicated in her testimony that John had had that for about a year. So during the course of 2 years or so of the relationship with the defendant, he got it while he was dating the defendant. The defendant had the security code for the garage. Neither of the kids had access to the camera. Trooper Garino checked the laptop and the desktop that were left after the defendant did the quick cleanup upstairs with her father, upstairs in the home. Neither of those devices had access to the ring cameras.
Okay, so you're saying she deleted a ring camera video like through magic? How did she do that then? You know, nothing has access to the ring camera video, so how? Oh, right. Could it have been the police officers? Because we heard evidence that somebody saw those videos at the police and then they vanished. So
John had access on his phone. The defendant indicates, if you recall, in some of those text messages in regard to the romantic kiss that she placed on Mr. Higgins earlier on January, whatever it was, during the Patriots. Mr. Higgins and Mr. Jackson's indicating weren't very good friends with Mr. O'Keefe, but had been invited over to his home for a Patriots game, at which time the defendant escorted Mr. Higgins out of the garage and placed a romantic kiss on him. But during those text messages, when they're talking about that, if you recall, the defendant is saying something or joking about something that Mr. O'Keefe had been looking at the videos and had been asking her if there was something going on with her and Mr. Higgins. And what was her response to that? I know where the cameras are.
holy shit, he's trying to say she deleted the videos because she knows where the cameras are? I mean, I know where the cameras are at the courthouse. I know where the cameras are at my local bank. I know where the cameras are in lots of places. But you know what? They don't let me delete them. Like, I don't have this power where I can see a camera up on the wall and be like, delete. You know, like, that is not how that works.
There are only two videos missing from that ring system. One being the defendant getting to Mr. O'Keefe's house after murdering him, and the other when the defendant is showing Miss McCabe and Miss Roberts the broken tail light, both of which, both Miss McCabe.
Or McCabe and Roberts lied about that, right? That is also a possibility.
McCabe and Ms. Roberts testified as having occurred. No video of it.
Yeah, and they might have been full of shit.
January 29th. There were text messages and voicemails from the defendant to Mr. O'Keefe, 53 phone calls from 12:33 a.m. to 6:03 a.m. 0 phone calls to 911. The defendant calls Katie Camerano. The defendant calls her parents at 1:18 in the morning, 4:38 in the morning, 4:42 in the morning. The call then from Kaylee's phone to Ms. McCabe, because the defendant didn't have Ms. McCabe's phone number. Both Kaylee and Ms. McCabe indicate that the defendant initially indicates or says that she got into a fight with Mr. O'Keefe and left him at the waterfall. From this information, Ms. McCabe then testifies she starts to call her Julie Albert. Because Chris Albert, Julie Albert, they live close by the waterfall. Maybe that's where he went. As the phone is ringing, this is a phone call that both Mr. Albert and Ms. McCabe testified was never answered. As the phone is ringing, her husband Matthew McCabe reminds her that they saw the defendant and Mr. O'Keefe and the car outside of 34 Fairview. So she hangs up. During this call, or during these subsequent calls, the defendant indicates to Ms. McCabe, maybe I hit him, did I hit him? She then calls Ms. Roberts at 5 a.m. on the dot, indicates John's dead, hangs up the phone, calls back a minute later, indicates that Mr. O'Keefe was now hit by a plow and that he's dead. And then indicates further that she's drunk and doesn't remember. She tells Ms. McCabe about the cracked tail light before they even get in the vehicle and go anywhere, as you recall the testimony of Matthew McCabe, indicating that he has some concerns about them driving around in a vehicle with a damaged tail light in the middle of a blizzard. Ms. Roberts' testimony that she saw the broken tail light in the driveway at Ms. McCabe's house, and that it was consistent with what she observed in the photographs that were shown to her of it later in the Sally Port at the Canton Police Department garage when the search warrant is executed on February 1st.
I mean, this is a good argument as best he can, but and he's way better here than he was on his open. His open was rambling and disjointed. At least here he seems to be making arguments. Yeah.
You have the text messages between the defendant and Laura Sullivan from January 29th, in which the defendant indicates to Laura Sullivan that John is dead, indicates that we found him in the snow at 5 a.m. And every indication is that he was found in the snow by the defendant, Ms. McCabe, and Ms. Roberts around 6 a.m. 5 a.m. would be about an hour before. 5 a.m. would be between that time of where the defendant is unaccounted for, heading in the direction of 34 Fairview Road, 5:18, 5:35. Little things. The defendant asked Ms. McCabe to Google how long to die in the cold. She did so at 6:23 and 6:24 in the morning. You have the testimony of Ms. Hyde and Mr. Whitford as to SQLite databases, plist databases, Knowledge C databases, state DB tabs, as far as all of that. Also from Trooper Marino as well. These searches were unequivocally done at 6:23 and 6:24 in the morning, and not at 2:27 and 40 seconds in the morning. They were not deleted by user. That is not what deleted means. Frankly, Mr. Green, the last question that I asked Mr. Green is, was he aware that Cellbrite, and by Cellbrite, the person who designed that being Mr. Whitford, had to alter exactly how their software worked because of people like Mr. Green misinterpreting the data as he did in this case. And what did Mr. Green say? Yes. But those questions, as far as how long to die in the cold, I would submit mirror the questions that the defendant asked firefighter Whitley in the back of the ambulance, if you recall those. She asked firefighter Whitley how long to die in the cold without a jacket. He knew how Mr. O'Keefe was dressed.
Now, he said Ian Whiffen designed Celebrate. That's not true. Ian Whiffen joined Celebrate after it was a company. So no, that is not accurate.
She knew when she left him to die in the cold how he was dressed. The defendant made statements to firefighter Becker that the last time that she saw Mr. O'Keefe, they were in an argument. Again, back at the same ambulance as firefighter Whitby. You have testimony from firefighter Woodbury. Same kind of questions. If Mr. O'Keefe could be alive without a jacket. You have the testimony from each of these firefighters as to sort of the vacillating emotional state of the defendant that morning. What you have in the testimony from firefighter Woodbury is that despite all that, there were no tears that he observed from the defendant at that time. With each of those first responders.
No tears that he observed. This is what I mean by people will judge you. If you're crying, they'll say you're crying too hard. They'll say you're faking it. If you're not crying because you're in shock, they'll say, oh, you know, so yeah, when he says that there are little things, he's not kidding. Yeah.
Indicate that the defendant repeatedly stated, is he dead? Is he dead? Not, is he okay? Is he going to be okay? How is he? Any sort of questions about.
Oh my God, we're salami slicing, is he okay versus is he dead?
The medical condition. Is he dead? That phraseology repeated over and over and over again. And when you take into juxtaposition that phraseology, text to Laura Sullivan, found him in the snow at 5 a.m. The unaccounted for time heading in the direction of 34 Fairview Road, 5:18, 5:35. The repeated questioning, firefighter Whitney, firefighter Woodbury, asking Ms. McCabe to look up those things in her phone. She's looking for.
what does all of this mean together? Fuck all. That's what it means all when you put it all together. It means fuck all.
Confirmation is what she's looking for when she asks over and over again, is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? You have the testimony that you heard from Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts. I say them together because as far as these two women were concerned, they did not know each other really at all. The only time that they both testified to that they ever spent appreciably together prior to January 29, 2022 is when Mr. O'Keefe nicely took them out for sneakers because he had some sort of deal at a Reeboks outlet or something like that to try to pay them back for the help that they provided him and the children. Jennifer with respect to the niece and Kerry with respect to the nephew. But they're both contacted by the defendant in the early morning of January 29th. As Ms. McCabe testified, John was my friend. I love John. He was an amazing guy. At the waterfall, Mr. Alberts said going home to have a drink with his son, Brian Jr., if anyone wants to come. Open invitation to the table. She said to Mr. O'Keefe and the defendant, you guys should come. Both the defendant and the victim indicated that they wanted to come and that they were. She describes the phone calls and the text messages that she receives from Mr. O'Keefe, and she's providing directions. She indicates she's providing them directions.
I'm just looking at just how much more of this we have to put up with because, somebody, I just have the Lily Allen song playing in my head. F you very, very much. I kind of have that going now too. So, yep.
Go down Chapman. She describes how that is. And you've heard this testimony from a couple of different witnesses as far as the steepness as you're going down going down Fairview, coming off of Chapman. But you first go down a big steep hill. It flattens out for a little bit, and then you go down a second 2 hills going down on Chapman. Matching the GPS native location and the health data as far as where Mr. O'Keefe's phone is, a half mile away from 34 Fairview Road at the time that his health data is reporting that he's ascending or descending 3 flights of stairs. You hear the testimony from Ms. McCabe as far as the last time that she spoke to Mr. O'Keefe. And she's still trying to provide directions to Fairview because Mr. O'Keefe's never been there before, neither has the defendant, which is further corroborated in Trooper Garino's testimony as far as the vehicle passing by Fairview and then coming back in on the other side, having to reverse direction. But she's giving directions and she indicates that she uses a house that Mr. O'Keefe will be familiar with, that belonging to Bella or Bella's mom. Bella's mom is an ex-girlfriend for a short period of time, a long time ago. However, in the defendant's mind, it's so prescient on her mind that she's still talking about it the next morning or later on that morning when she's riding, going towards Fairview Road.
Ian invented his own software and Green was using his software and was also using Ian's software program, but was saying Ian was wrong in his testimony. Except that this dude said that Whiffen invented Celebrite, that he developed Celebrite, which is not true. He's wrong. Whiffen invented his own technology, but that's not Celebrite. So, no. Yeah. God, now that song is just like stuck in my head.
With Ms. Roberts and Ms. McCabe in Ms. Roberts' car. She's still talking about it at that time. It's that much on her mind. Ms. McCabe indicated that she looked out and she saw a vehicle initially in front of the front door as Mr. McCabe, as Brian Albert Jr., as Julie Nagel.
He wasn't. Ian Whiffen never claimed to have invented Celebrite. Lolly said Ian Whiffen invented Celebrite, but he didn't. So, yeah. I know, I'm pointing out where Lolly is wrong. So, yeah.
Brian Nagel and the vehicle moved up several times or several spots to where it was then positioned. Initially at some point in front of the door, then it moves up further so that it's in the area of the fire hydrant and the flagpole where Mr. O'Keefe's body was discovered later on that morning, at least by Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts, and then moves up further beyond that. And I say that in the sense that it moves up further beyond that with sufficient distance for it to then go in reverse for 62.5 feet at 24.2 miles per hour, striking Mr. O'Keefe and leaving him where he was found later on.
FU by
Again,
Lily Allen.
From Ms. McCabe that about 12:40 when she's texting him, she indicated in her testimony she couldn't be certain if Mr. O'Keefe was still out front or had left at that point. She wakes up to a phone call from John's niece, Kaylee, at 4:53 in the morning. This is from an 8th grader, 14-year-old girl. That's why she answers the phone at 4:53 in the morning. She then hears the defendant screaming loudly over and over again, Jen. John didn't come home, got in a fight, left him at the waterfall. The variations, the different iterations of that story as it evolves and changes over the course of that morning. Ms. McCabe then indicates to the defendant, we saw you.
Sir, your story's changed so many times. So, yep.
Outside of my sister's house. Then she starts yelling, Jen, did I hit him? Could I hit him? Then they start discussing what the defendant brings up her cracked tail. Then both Ms. McCabe and Mr. McCabe hear the defendant screaming outside of their home at about 5 o'clock in the morning, or shortly after 5 o'clock in the morning. They go to Mr. O'Keefe's house. And both Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts indicates, and you heard this testimony from a number of different witnesses, friends and family of Mr. O'Keefe that he had a rule, pretty strict rule in his house as far as you take your shoes off when you come in the house. And so what did Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts both do?
Okay, let's slow this down to one speed because this is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, and it just made me rage.
There's testimony from a number of different witnesses, friends and family of Mr. O'Keefe, that he had a rule, pretty strict rule in his house as far as you take your shoes off when you come in the house. And so what did Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts both do when they're entering in that house on January 29th? They take off their boots, they get out in the snow, they take off their boots in the mudroom, and then they walk in. What did they both indicate that the defendant did that morning when she came back to the house? Walked right in with the shoes. You hear that second voicemail. It's after the defendants arrived back at One Meadows Ave, after her phone is reconnected with Mr. O'Keefe's Wi-Fi. And you can hear the footsteps. Part of that may be in the garage, part of that might be in the house. Why is it that the defendant has no issue with wearing shoes in the house when Mr. O'Keefe has that strict rule? Because she knows where he is. She knows it's not an issue. He's not coming home because she hit him with her SUV and she left him in the snow.
Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, she's in a panic. She doesn't take her shoes off. And you're saying that's awareness of murder? Fuck off. This is the kind of argument that is so stupid that honestly, they like, I could absolutely see a juror just being like, if that's your argument, you've got nothing. That's fucking stupid. Lolly, you should be embarrassed of that. I think that there should be like a clip of that argument playing nonstop in his afterlife. It's just like, hey, you get to hear that you made this stupid ass argument for the rest of time. Fucking shit. Why didn't she take her shoes off? Fuck. Like, come on. When I'm in a panic or in a hurry, like, hey, I'm going to get shit for this. People are going to make jokes, but I don't have my shoes on it in the house either. But if I'm in a hurry, if I'm in a worry, like, let's say I'm, racing to get to a job interview or something, and I forgot my wallet in the house, I'm probably just going to run in with my shoes on and, like, oh. All right, we're taking them back up to 1.5 because, yeah.
Ms. Roberts and Ms. McCabe frantically sort of running around the house looking for Mr. O'Keefe. Defendant's not. They then get in the vehicle. They drive back towards Fairview Road. And again, the defendant from the backseat of the vehicle immediately sees the defendant, starts pulling and kicking on the door, and runs in sort of a beeline straight over to where Mr. O'Keefe is laying on the front lawn. You have the testimony from Ms. Roberts as far as John's phone. John's phone, when the firefighters pick him up, and you recall several witnesses testifying about that, pick him up on scoop stretcher and then bring him over to the ambulance while they're conducting the resuscitative efforts trying to save Mr. O'Keefe's life. But Ms. Roberts indicated that she observed underneath.
If she had taken off her shoes, he would probably say, you know how calm she was? She wasn't worried. She just took the time to take off her shoes. Like,
phone on the grass in the area that is completely covered in snow in every other area except under Mr. O'Keefe, which I would submit indicates how long Mr. O'Keefe has been there. Now recall, around 12 o'clock or so is when it starts to snow and it starts to stick a little bit. And you heard all that testimony. And I know it was a lot of testimony about snow, a lot of testimony about weather, but there's a purpose to that. There's a point to that. Okay?
No, there wasn't, Lolly. No, there wasn't.
As far as the grass underneath Mr. O'Keefe's body, where his cell phone was, Ms. Roberts observed some 6 hours later after it starts snowing, is still visible only under Mr. O'Keefe where his body is, which I would submit as evidence to you as to how long he's been there. Now, on top of that,
did you call an expert on that? No. Oh.
You also have hours of ring videos of the driveway as far as shoveling and Paul O'Keefe and other people snow blowing and shoveling and all those kinds of things. There's a purpose to that as well. If you look at the video of the defendant crashing into Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle at a speed of anywhere from 0 to 5, which even Dr. Wolf would.
Oh, so now you're acknowledging that she crashed into the vehicle. Oh, because you said earlier that didn't happen. Now you're acknowledging it.
Indicate would not cause the damage to the.
Sorry, I wanted to be fairer to him, or I wanted to give him more. I wanted to sort of fluff him up a bit more, but he's pissing me off. So,
taillight that was observed in this case. You know what you don't see? You don't see snow move off Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle when they come into contact. You don't see any red or clear plastic pieces in the snow. And if you look at those stills, not the ones that counsel put up there during his closing, but if you look at each of the video in the stills, you can see the damage consistent with the taillight at each and every point. You see the damage consistent with the taillight from the 507 video. You see the damage.
You don't, though. They showed us the pictures.
Consistent from the 822 video from Lieutenant Ray from the cruiser camera video when he's pulling into the driveway. You see the damage consistent from the Dighton video at the defendant's home. You see the damage consistent from the right here, February 1st, 2022, when the search warrant is conducted. Ms. Hartnett removes all those pieces from the vehicle. The weather is also important when it comes to the hair. The magic hair, as Mr. Jackson likes to call it. See, the magic hair was actually frozen to the vehicle, as was the glass to the bumper, because the vehicle looked like that on the left when it was caked in snow. And Officer Barrow saw it in the driveway in Dighton as they were wading through 1.5 feet of snow, walking up.
Okay, so you're saying that this hair was, from like, okay, so the hair, like the vehicle hits John O'Keefe, the hair sticks to it through this long circuitous drive. Like, okay,
Remember, they didn't even pull into the driveway because they had to have someone come down and plow it before they could get into it. That's what the vehicle looked like. What you can see, however, is the damage to the taillight, to the side of that taillight, consistent with it. So that hair, that 7/8 of an inch hair, was frozen to the side. And as you remember, the testimony from Sergeant Buchanan.
This is the first we're hearing about it being frozen to the vehicle. That's a new argument.
About the heated condition of the Canton Police Department garage, and that's one of the reasons that they took it there, because the other barracks that they could have taken it to didn't have that heated condition. So yes, after it's been in there from January 29th, about 5:30 p.m. until February 1st, when they conduct the search warrant, the hair isn't still frozen, as it's contained within the heated garage, and the pieces of glass on the rear bumper have melted. The snow has melted, as you can see from left to right. The weather, also important, I would submit, weather was wet. Remember, the cause of death here is not just blunt impact injuries, it's blunt impact injuries and hypothermia. You heard all that medical testimony in relation to it, and you heard all that testimony in relation to the snow and the weather and the wind. Wind gusts up to 37 miles per hour while he's out, Mr. O'Keefe is out there in just a shirt and jeans. Now, you heard also testimony from Ms. Roberts in relation to the injuries she observed to Mr. O'Keefe, that initially on scene, there was one eye that was swollen, not the other. So that's indication of the swelling that Dr. Sporty-Bello was testifying to, and no indication of physical altercation. And then both eyes being swollen when Ms. Roberts viewed Mr. O'Keefe's body after his passing at the Good Samaritan. Submit that all the testimony tells you the same consistent account, internally, externally, from civilian testimony to investigator testimony to medical testimony to forensic testimony to the reconstruction testimony.
No, it doesn't. I mean, people's testimony isn't the same from their direct to their cross. So
you have the testimony from Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts that they couldn't see Mr. O'Keefe at Fairview when they initially pulled up. You can see that from Officer Sarah's cruiser. You have Mr. O'Keefe being covered in snow from the storm. You know where Mr. O'Keefe's body was. It's clearly visible on the cruiser camera from Officer Sarah. You have testimony from each of the responding officers, anywhere from 5 to 12 feet off the roadway, and from the civilians as well. Ms. McCabe, Ms. Roberts, Officer Mullaney has 6 inches of snow on Mr. O'Keefe when he first sees him. Firefighter Kelly says that he couldn't even see Mr. O'Keefe until he was 5 feet away, in the darkness, in the snow, with blizzard conditions. There's no footprints around the body. There's no drag marks around the body.
there's no drag marks around the body. Aren't you saying that? Okay.
There's no evidence of that.
It was snowing, sir. So, you know what snow does? It hides tracks.
Anything in relation to Brian Albert and Brian Higgins. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins spent January 28, 2022, traveling to New York City to go to a funeral for another police officer, for another department, who they didn't even know. Traveled all the way down to New York and then came back before the blizzard, only to come back from that to go.
He's such a good guy. He couldn't possibly have, gotten into a fight with a cop.
Out drinking, to come back to Mr. Albert's house, to then murder another police officer who they did know, who worked for the same department as them. And then criminal mastermind genius that Brian Albert is, 28 years on the Boston Police Department, he's then going to just leave Mr. O'Keefe's body on his front lawn. Really? That's a conspiracy?
No, the conspiracy would be, and there's a fall guy. or in this case, fall girl.
What evidence do you have of that? You have statements that the defendant made to Sergeant Buchanan on January 29th. She was willing to speak, but didn't want to give too much detail. Conversational tone throughout. She indicated that the night before, they had gotten into an argument, something about what was fed to the children, nothing about the detailed arguments and incessant phone calls and everything else that you saw from the defendant and Mr. O'Keefe's phone on the 28th. She indicated that she got to C.F. McCarthy's around 9 p.m., started drinking vodka sodas, the men were drinking beers. When asked where she parked her vehicle, she said she parked on Washington Street across from C.F. McCarthy's, facing northbound on the side, same side as Waterfall. Same testimony that you heard from Ms. Kolakithis, observing the defendant going over to her vehicle, getting in the driver's seat, and the victim, Mr. O'Keefe, getting into the passenger seat. She said they left the Waterfall, were invited to her residence. She drove her and John to the location in Canton. She dropped Mr. O'Keefe off, did not see him walk in the home. She, being the defendant, stated she made a 3-point turn and then left. When asked about the damage to her vehicle, she indicated to the troopers, "I don't know, it happened last night."
I think he's a long way away from proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but we'll see what the jury says.
June 2022, you have that other recording of that other version that she now has evolved into as far as stating to Sergeant Buchanan, "Are you aware that John was beaten up by Brian and Colin Albert? We're all in on the same joke, right? John was pulverized and my taillight was cracked." What evidence do you have of that? Mr. O'Keefe never went in the house.
I don't know why he's bringing that up as, I don't know why he's telling the jury that.
You have testimony from Nicole Albert, Brian Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, Caitlin Albert, Brian Albert Jr., Sarah Levinson, Julie Nagel, all indicating never went in the house. John O'Keefe's phone never went in the house from the testimony and the data points that you have from Trooper Green. You know how Mr. O'Keefe was dressed, and you know the defendant knew that. You have the testimony from Kurt Roberts, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, Karina Kolakithis, Nicholas Kolakithis, Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Brian Higgins, all indicated in their testimony, and the defendant knew, based on our questions to the firefighters the next morning, that Mr. O'Keefe was not dressed for the weather when he left the waterfall. The weather
Okay.
was a weapon.
I mean, I have gone out in weather worse than that in less than he was wearing. But, I mean, I get that the people of Canton, Massachusetts are weather wusses, but okay.
You have the testimony about the car, the defense car being there in front of the house, moving multiple times. You have that from multiple sources. You have that from Matthew McCabe. You have that from Jennifer McCabe. You have that from Brian Albert Jr. You have that from Julie Nagel. You have that from Ryan Nagel. You have the testimony of Ryan Nagel, Ricky D'Antonio, and Heather Maxon. Ms. Maxon indicated she saw a male passenger, female operator as the vehicle was turned. Remember, they're coming towards Fairview at the same time. The defendant, after conducting that reverse, a 3-point turn on Cedar Crest, is then taking a right on Fairview, while Mr. Nagel, Mr. D'Antonio, and Ms. Maxon are taking a left on Fairview. Mr. Nagel indicates that Mr. D'Antonio then flashes lights. During that time, Ms. Maxon can see inside the vehicle. She sees a male passenger. She sees a female operator. They follow the vehicle as they're turning onto the street. Lo and behold, they're going to the same residence. They park. There's nothing in between them and the defendant's vehicle. They indicate that at no time do they see anybody get out of the vehicle. At no time do they see any damage to the vehicle, or it hasn't happened yet. At no time do they see anyone leave the vehicle and go into the house. The vehicle moves up on different successive occasions, as testified to by Mr. Nagel and several others. And then as they're passing that vehicle, Mr. Nagel indicates that he sees a female operator in the vehicle with the dome light on. Interesting, when I asked Mr. Nagel, as far as when Julie Nagel came out to the vehicle, did he roll down the window or did he open the door? He indicated he opened the door. I asked him, what happened when you open the door? What happens when you open the door to a vehicle? The dome light comes on. So there's reason I would submit, or the inference that you can make, is that no one sees Mr. O'Keefe in the vehicle because that's the moment he steps out of the vehicle. And then they're gone. The Nagels, Brian Nagel, Ricky D'Antonio, and Heather Maxon drive away from that. Here's the testimony from Julie Nagel and Sarah Levinson, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich conversation they have with Ms. McCabe, which while they're pulling away from the house where everybody's attention is drawn, Ms. McCabe is turned around facing both of them in the backseat. Ms. Nagel is facing Ms. Levinson on.
See, here he's trying to tell his story about what happened, and I feel like the jury is probably just like, they're thinking, man, I want to get home and I want to have like 9 drinks. It's not a good close, but it's way better than his open was, because his open was one of the worst opening statements I've ever seen.
After the side, looking out the window towards 34 Fairview Road.
He's at least
Ms.
telling
Levinson's
a
looking back at
story.
Ms. Nagel away from that area, in which Ms. Nagel indicates that she sees a 5 to 6 foot dark blob on the lawn near the pole in the hydrant, which is just where Mr. O'Keefe is discovered the next morning. You have testimony recalled, and you have text messages in regard to Colin Albert when he gets picked up.
Mr. Lally, 5 minutes.
Yes, Colin Albert, Ms. Allison McCabe, Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Caitlin Albert, Brian Jr., all indicating that he was picked up around that time at 12:10 a.m. You have the testimony from Chris and Julie Albert, his parents, as far as when he comes home, kisses them goodnight before he goes to bed. You have that testimony in regard to Chris Albert, as far as how John O'Keefe and the defendant come to be at the waterfall in the first place, as far as John O'Keefe and his nephew coming in early in the day, getting a couple slices of pizza, what are you doing later on, contained within those text messages. You have testimony from Lieutenant O'Hara, Lieutenant Tully, Sergeant Mechanic about those items being recovered. And in particular, the items being recovered on January 29th by that search. What did Lieutenant O'Hara say? The items were found close to the curb. The items were around.
I'm just going to say, who was watching this and when they heard Mr. Lally, you had 5 minutes, went, thank God it's going to end. Thank God. What do I think the verdict will be? I'm 80% for acquittal. 80% not guilty. But juries can do weird things. So, yep.
3 feet of snow that they had to sift through in order to find those particular things. The detail or the delay in the recovery of evidence. The photos in the video, most of which you have in evidence, is earlier in the storm. This is before the 18 inches of snow falls down, before there's drifts and 3 feet of snow in places. They found evidence where it had been at that same ground level, in the grass, under the snow, at 34 Fairview Road. You heard all of the medical testimony, which I would submit is consistent, from firefighter Famati to Dr. Rice. You heard testimony regarding the defendant's blood alcohol concentration from Dr. Fowler and Nick Roberts, 93 milligrams per deciliter, 0.07 to 0.08% at 9:08 in the morning. You heard it, Mr. Roberts' testimony in regard to the retrograde extrapolation, 0.13 to 0.29, extrapolating back to the time of the operation. The defendant admits to drinking vodka. It's on the receipt.
Here he is panicking because he's running through things as fast as he can, hitting, like, I'm making a point, like he's jumping from point to point because the 5 minutes hit him and he's got a lot of shit he wants to say and he just doesn't have the time to get through it right now. That's why he's going through, like, and just dropping these bits as he runs through.
From C.F. McCarthy's and from the waterfall. And you have the witness testimony in the surveillance video in regard.
You see how he just went through an entire page in 30 seconds? It's because he's rushing.
Forensic testimony that you have. In regard to the medical testimony, you have the sort of pattern abrasions, clear plastic that's recovered by Lieutenant O'Hara and Lieutenant Tully on January 29th. The clear plastic that has the dimples on it. No one, not to recall on anyone at any point in time, ever said Mr. O'Keefe's arm was out like this at the time that he struck, and he did it.
They kind of did, yeah. They kind of did.
Pirouette and then flew 30 feet in the air. 12 inches of abrasions that the doctors were, the biomechanical people were talking about yesterday. 12 inches and then 6 inches to the tail end. It's easily solved by this.
Is it? If that is what easily solves it, why didn't you put that to the biomechanical experts? Why didn't you ask the biomechanical experts if that was, if that was an explanation? Because if I had more time on, like, if I was allowed to split time, I would say, he says this solves it. He didn't ask that of any of the experts because he knew they would have said no.
And the dimples on his arm that I would submit are consistent with the dimples on the tail light cover piece, are right around this area of the elbow. You have testimony in regard to forensics as far as Mr. Porto, Mr. Bradford. John O'Keefe's DNA is on that tail light house, on the house. His DNA is there to the exclusion as well of Sergeant Mechanic and Trooper Proctor. Mr. O'Keefe's DNA is on the exterior of the broken drinking glass. Mr. O'Keefe's DNA and only Mr. O'Keefe's DNA is on his clothing and his fingernails, consistent with Dr. Sporty Bello's testimony that there is no evidence of a fight or an altercation. There's no one else's DNA under his fingernails.
Wasn't it that there was multiple sources of DNA all over him? No.
There's no one else's DNA on his clothing. You have testimony from Ms. Hardman, Trooper Paul, as regard to the damage that they observed, the dent, scratches, 7/8 of an inch hair. You have the testimony from Ms. Chart in regard to the mitochondrial DNA profile from that hair being consistent with the DNA profile of Mr. O'Keefe. You have the testimony from Ms. Lear and Ms. Hanley in regard to the microscopic pieces, 1/16 of an inch by 1/16.
Now, it might have just been that there was other DNA like on his pants or something and that he was selective about which clothing. But when he's accusing the other side of playing 3-card Monty, that's kind of shady there, Lally.
You have 1 minute, Mr. Lally. Wrap it up.
Yes, sir. All consistent with pieces of taillight that are found within his clothing.
1 minute warning. Victim services person.
605. This is what this vehicle looks like backing up at that speed for approximately that distance. There's another, years and years ago, started practicing in Norfolk County, Braintree, what is now Quincy, and eventually became a far smarter man than myself, eventually became president.
Holy shit, dude, you've got a minute. You're telling a story? Then I tied an onion to my belt, as was the fashion at the time. No, you've got a minute. Cut the fucking story.
Started practicing in Norfolk County, Braintree, was now Quincy. Eventually became a far smarter man than myself. Eventually became president of the United States. His name was John A.
A far smarter man than yourself. So he was like a bitch.
Braintree, was now Quincy. Eventually became a far smarter man than myself. Eventually became president of the United States. His name was John A. And whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of the facts and the evidence. What the constellation of the facts and the evidence ineluctably demonstrate here is that the
And that's
defendant
time.
drove her vehicle in reverse at 24.2 miles per hour for 62.5 feet, struck Mr. O'Keefe, causing those catastrophic head injuries, leaving him incapacitated and freezing to death.
Mr. Lally, I have to stop you. You've gone over.
I literally have one sentence.
One sentence.
You know what I would have done if I was the judge? When he's like, I've got one sentence. I would have said, then you should have said it in your time. Sit down, Mr. Lally. You have one sentence left. You should have said it when you had a minute left. Sit down. I'm not giving you that minute. But she gives him the sentence.
I'll give you.
From that facts and that evidence, I would submit ineluctably demonstrates her guilt on each of the indictments before you, and I would ask that you find this. Okay?
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I would have just been like, no, sorry. I warned you at 5 minutes. I warned you at 1 minute. You're out of time. Sorry. I have quite literally watched like Court of Appeal matters where it's, and time, and that's it. I would have just been like, nope. You had time for your sentence. You used it on other shit. You don't get that sentence. So, all right, let's roll through some super chats here, and we're gonna see what we're gonna go through the super chats, and then we'll wind up. So, Burberry's FBI is also involved because Sandra Birchmore involving allegations of underage bad stuff from cops. Plus, Proctor is also in the lead on the upcoming Walsh case. I'm not familiar with those ones as much. I got to do some research into them and start looking into them. So, Baby Gator, after 10 weeks, the jury just wants to sit around, talk, and say, can you believe this poop? You're not wrong. Annabelle Feinstein, hubby, a.k.a. Menachem David, chuckled when you read his super chat. He was fascinated tonight. He's put up with the entire trial. I feel for the jurors who've put up with the entire trial because, yeah. Kim Carter, the only other time I've heard the phrase festering malignancy is in the opening of the Rankin Bass movie of Return of the King. Fair. Wendy Wilkinson, Jackson saying they said just look the other way, and then Lally basically reinforcing that during his close was a clever strategy by Jackson, in my opinion. Yeah, he did kind of say just ignore what Proctor did. Michigan Farm Boy, thank you so much for the YouTube membership. Froggy Girl, thank you for the 10 gifted memberships. Very generous. Hi by password. A friend of mine is coming to visit me. She reminds me of you. Journalist, never sleeps. Similar dry cadence. Wonderful friend. Please say hi, Janelle. Hi, Janelle. Nice to meet you. Ish. Robin Day, jury. Only the EMT said that. Why is he lying? If the jury's been paying attention, they may have some concerns about what he had to say. Splashdown CA, thank you so much for the YouTube membership. Just because subatomic, how small are they? 1/16 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch. Rob, I think she did say I hit him, but was fooled by the setup, and Jen manipulated her into thinking that. Should defense have mentioned that in closing? I think defense did pretty good. I got no complaints about defense, really. Wendy Wilkinson, also for Soup Fun. Feel better soon, Mrs. Runkle. I bought a whole bunch of cans of soup. They're not great, but they're a can of soup, so they're decent enough. Lindsay, timing how long it takes Rob to appear when someone tells him you're throwing shade at a paisley tie. I like Rob's tie. It's just that tie was yeah. I hope Runkle can see the AI summary because it's delightful. Apparently, Runkle is prosecuting Rittenhouse. I cannot see the AI summary, but that is hilarious. So that's fun. What's his summer is 19? Numbskull, numbskull, numbskull. I mean no disrespect, but you have to be logical. I love you, Runkle, especially your logic and words. Thank you so much. Michigan Farm Boy, the saying is ignore everything before the but because it is a lie, doesn't mean it regarding Proctor. Yep. Aya, we know that Karen did not hit him because of physics and a cannon. I pray the family gets answers. Me too. I hate Lolly for dragging him through this trial and how he had to know that his case was crap. I think he thinks he's a glorious fighter trying to bring them justice. That's what I genuinely think he thinks. Jacqueline Weaver, during jury selection, were jurors asked about their experiences with dog bites or attacks? I don't know, but maybe. Also sending good vibes to Mrs. Runkle for a speedy recovery. Thank you so much. Bruce West, Lolly is going to lie about the arm. He does indeed. Noel Nidun, if I was a juror, I'd be pissed. Commonwealth made me sit through weeks of trial when they had and read the reconstruction reports and still charged Karen. Yep. Jackie Lindy, I know this is a serious trial where a man is dead and a woman is fighting for life. Still, part of me wonders if there's going to be a waffling because of this trial. Oh, a waffling? I'm not sure. Baby Gator, can we stop talking about our text messages and talk about like evidentiary support and stuff? No, they don't have any of that. So, Jesse, did we ever see receipts, credit card charges, bartender? Not really. Not that support the 9 drink theory anyway. Partially stars, he used the wrong dang key cycle. This is moot. Wendy Wilkinson, that front yard is not a huge front yard either. Hard not to notice something in the yard. If I recall correctly, the jury had a scene visit. I think they did. Kelly B, amazing Jen McCabe watching vehicle out the window for several minutes is not shown on the timeline. Yeah. Sally Port, unless she took an Uber back to 34 Fairview and confronted him with a golf club, she's factually innocent. It's that simple. Kinda, yeah. And I mean, that is possible. Teal and Violet, when the Commonwealth played Karen Reed's screaming as proof she was a whack job murderer, not a traumatized grieving woman, they lost me. Do you know how much misogynist they appear top down? Pro bono fun for you. Thank you so much. Laura Boborin, got cheated on once, called my mom at 2. Right? SK, I'm still catching up, but Lolly following up. Those texts were unprofessional with a, but it doesn't matter, feels so gross. It kind of does. Maria Teresa, Emily went through what was on her bingo card, playing hide the mushroom and scratching an itch on her cervix, weren't on mine. Lol, love your recaps, Runkle. Sometimes my brain is a weird place. Chelsea Rama, Lolly's timeline demonstrative goes 5:18 a.m., 5:35 a.m., 5:23 a.m. His own demonstrative is impossible. Yeah, I didn't notice that, but you might be right. Andrew, so if jurors spot Lolly as a lying piece of crap, what does that usually mean for a trial? Usually would mean acquittal. Tom Kerr, just a hypothetical question, but would misleading comments / lies by a lawyer during closing be grounds for appeal? Not usually. Usually you have to object to it, and it's tough. I don't think there was any objection or request for an instruction or anything like that, so there won't be. EVR, this is like Rottenborn's gaslighting in his closing, but in this case, Karen Reed could go to freaking jail, which makes Lolly way worse. Yep. Speedy Lee, so she deleted Ring videos, but she didn't brush off the glass from the bumper. Apparently, Gringa, he's cherry picking and spinning things like an SOB. Yep. Sometime alias, give me a bid, $10. Do I have 1045? Guy Finley, John wanted out of the relationship so bad he was pleading with her to come out to the bar or he wouldn't have a ride home. Yeah. A lot of their story just makes no sense. Something different. Heat index will be 107 tomorrow. I may need to move to Canada. I've got my air conditioning running. Thank you so much as well for joining up. Rach Hunting. She was in shock and got the time wrong. In shock, questioning what happened and what might have happened. Yeah. Ash Elizabeth XOX. I'm sorry, but I'm not big on crying. I don't know if my job has just ruined me, but I don't cry much. I guess that would be used against me. A lot of people react differently. One very common thing people say post, like family member's death or something is that sometimes it takes them like a few weeks before they cry, right? Sometimes they don't cry right away. And so that's not a sign of guilt. It's just people grieve differently. Lucy, thank you so much for the super sticker. Much appreciated. Wendy Wilkinson, he's using those little things to get the jury to just look the other way, just as Jackson asserted. Yep. Maury, thank you so much for the YouTube membership. Much appreciated. Kathy, why would a 40-year-old woman call her elderly parent in the early morning hours and wake them up to do what? Complain about her boyfriend? Ask for dating advice? Complain an adult man refuses to answer 50 calls? Reasonable. Gwendolyn SS, can the jury use not believing Lally in decisions? No, they shouldn't. Bruce West, but they do. He does not show John O'Keefe hit her with a pillow. Yeah, fair. Jeremy Morton, watching your stream at 2 times of Lally at 1.5, and I'm still questioning my choices, leading to me hearing him for any length of time. Fair. Lindsay G, I ran out barefoot to meet the first responders when my daughter was dying in November. Footwear is not an indication of anything. Right? And I hope your daughter's all right. I hope that I'm like, oh, please. So, Rob Smith, I knew we'd have new evidence. It's not so much new evidence as, yeah. Barb loves Cali 88. Thanks for the new membership. Fender, hey Ian, thanks to you, EDB lawyer, for making shitty job hunt time feel doable. Grateful to be part of your community. Job hunts do suck, and so I'm glad that we're making it suck a little less. Bent arm means the scratches don't line up. Yeah, there is that problem. Waffling came from Proctor's text with friends. I remember. Oh, right, somebody getting run over. Yeah. Let's hope not. BGMNYT, Hoss long to die in the closing. Catastrophe, healing dust for Lady Runkle. Ms. Thank You Funkle from Ms. Thank You Funkle. Thank you. Lisa Landmark, my misophonia makes me ache with the lolly cough. That is annoying. Jeremy Morton, I survived lolly 2024. Yeah. Darkfire Zero, marked safe during lolly closing. Autumn, that was a mean-ass taillight that bit his arm. Yeah, that taillight's got some weird fangs on it. Okay, so that was the closing. And now it's over to deliberation. The jury's making the decisions now. They're going to come back with a verdict when they've got one. If they get one, because they could still hang. So, but I think we'll probably see one tomorrow. We'll see. But that's my bet, is that we'll see one tomorrow. I'm in court tomorrow. It's virtual court, but so I had some people saying, Runkle, will you go live the instant the verdict comes out? And the answer to that is probably not, because I have court. So I'm probably going to be stuck doing that. All right, I am going to wrap up here, and I will see you guys, see you guys later. I see Lally's a disgrace. Thanks for fostering this community. Thank you so much. Hoss long until a verdict. I think tomorrow, but I'm not certain. KC, Runkle, I have to agree. You do tend to carry on. However, most of the time I learn a lot. F-Arms intelligence shines through all of you attorneys. God bless you all. I do tend to carry on a bit. All right, let's, somebody's requesting the doggo swoop. A lovely little palate cleanser after Lally. And now I'm going to do the outro swoop. So I will see you guys soon, I guess. Good night, everyone.